I must say that every time I come here now, which is a far better alternative than sitting at home, I keep having some juvenile thought like when I was a kid watching The Lone Ranger and saying, "Who that masked man?" Everybody. Anyhow, welcome to our meeting today. This, as part of our pre-commission, I'd like to know if anyone has anything to say about our agenda. Commissioners, any comments?
Mr. President, as a reminder, we would like you to redo or refer consent agenda item number 2 back to staff for 1 week.
Yes. So whoever makes the motion to approve the consent agenda, please ask for, that was item number 2, right?
Yes, the piggyback for the
2 to
vehicles.
be remanded or referred back to staff for 1 week, certain.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Just a housekeeping item on that particular item. Under meeting, it does list the Bicycle Advisory Committee. You may have already caught that, but just going forward, we probably want to make that correction.
That was on the minutes?
No, the item that we are going to remand back to staff, number 2, the piggyback.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. It's going to be remanded one way or the other. Anything else? Okay. Anything from well, we don't have to discuss the regular agenda. Then we'll go ahead and let the director give his director's report. Thank you.
Commissioner Goldthorpe, Commissioners, thank you. A couple items to update you on. Late-breaking news, of course. All of the school flashers, student crosswalks have been completed by our team in record number of time. This is absolutely tremendous. And what's very interesting about this is that just a little bit ago I was advised by our Deputy Director here that Boise School District has already asked for a retiming to do on Mondays. This is great timing for us. We'll go over, we'll just hit a couple switches, and we're done. And such. So this is absolutely great news. Your traffic and ops team did a tremendous job on making this happen as quickly as they did.
I'm grateful it's done.
Again, in line with the governor's orders, as you all know, we have moved formally from, Idaho's moved from phase 2 to phase 3. And with that in mind, we, with your concurrences, of course, will start the cautious process of starting to open up, expanding ACHD a little bit more. You may have noticed here in the auditorium, we've already established the appropriate seating with the appropriate distances, and we will be looking at other actions moving forward to start opening operations for ACHD. This afternoon, I'll be reviewing the staff's what we call a return to work action plan and such. I will send that to all of you later on this evening, first thing tomorrow morning, with our intent of beginning that on Friday or Monday, whichever the way that goes and such. And then we do know, as you all know, that the vaccines for COVID continue to remain a little bit elusive. And such, and we'll keep you posted as to where the Ada County Highway District finally winds up in that priority sequence and such. But right now, I think they all have enough on their hands to worry about than where we're going to be in line at this point in time. We continue, and you're going to receive a great presentation today from our lobbyists to monitor all of the interesting legislation that's going on. I did send to all of you yesterday the proposal on ensuring that bike lanes and paths and stuff are all included in the definition of highways, which is very important for your opportunities to do different things if that legislation is passed and such. We'll keep you posted on that. Anyway, I also, you may have seen it, I don't know if you checked your email yet, but your class photo was in. And it's in your emails and such. Please take a look at it. And we also have your individual headshots for your official use across the board. They did a great job. Commissioner Goldthorpe, they made you look a lot younger.
Oh, you used my old one. All right.
As I briefed you just a little bit ago, the 50th anniversary celebration planning has started. I will keep you all fully advised of what we would like to do. Of course, you'll have the determinations on that, but we are going to be marking on your calendars 11 August 2021. That's a Wednesday. That's a commission meeting. Our intention is to hold the big formal presentation and celebration on that day, because on 11 August 1971, that was the first official meeting for the Idaho County Highway District. So karma just lined up on these sort of things. So we will keep you posted, and Commissioner Goldthorpe will do our best to find you that Grateful Dead T-shirt that you'd like to have as part of the celebration and such. Next week's work sessions, as a reminder, will be the Master Street Map, the Livable Streets Guide, and those related issues, plus the law.
Director, I hate to interrupt you, but somebody's trying to get in. There we go. Thank you.
Okay. And then we are continuing to work and coordinate 2 upcoming joint sessions. One with the new commissioners at Ada County as a meet and greet, and then a presentation on ACHD 101. We're looking for that in February, and then we are coordinating with a STAR for their joint session, and they've recommended we look at that in April timeframe. So we will continue to work through that. And with that, I want to remind you all that ACHD will be closed on February 15th for celebration of President's Day. And with that, I stand for any questions that you might have.
Any questions? I don't think so.
Okay, very good. You have about 8 minutes then.
Thank you.
Signs. Do we want to put the signs?
Share the screen. The green button down below. Share here.
He has already signed up for public comment, not on any item.
Okay. Oh, okay. I remember those days.
Drop this.
No, you can, well, that's okay. Might want to maximize this.
Yeah.
Third time.
Mr. President, Commissioners, it's now 12 o'clock.
Thank you, Director. I'd like to welcome everyone to Ada County Highway District for this week's commission meeting. Before we begin, and I take no pleasure in this because it's the second week in a row we've had to do something like this, I would like to ask for a moment of silence on behalf of the 3 that lost their lives yesterday in the Black Hawk helicopter crash. Thank you very much. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the families of these individuals who are going to be dealing with this for the rest of their lives. We'll begin our meeting today, as we usually do, by inviting you to stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance with us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
And to the republic for
One nation.
indivisible. Thank you. Now I would entertain a motion to approve our agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any nay votes? Okay, thank you. We'll go to the approval of the consent agenda, which items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. All consent agenda items are commission action items unless otherwise noted. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I move we accept the consent agenda with item number 2 being referred back to staff for date certain of 10 February 2021.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll go to the regular agenda now, and the first item on the, which are all action items, by the way. First item on our agenda is the fiscal year 2021 impact fee loan balance presentation. And Christine, thanks for being here.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. For the record, Christine Tandler, Budget Coordinator with Ada County Highway District. I'm here to present the Impact Fee Balance Report for the first quarter of fiscal year 2021. We began the year with a program balance of $1.2 million. We are ending the first quarter with, excuse me, a program balance of $3.5 million in the Impact Fee Program. Some of the main impact fee projects to date are Cole and Victory Road, completing the intersection of that State and Pierce Park intersection, which is right-of-way, and 10 Mile McMillan to Chinden, which will be a construction, which is construction costs. The extraordinary impact fees had a beginning balance of $2.2 million and ended the fiscal year, ended the first quarter of the fiscal year at $2.5 million. The staff reports the loan for the general fund has been repaid, and the impact fee program has a balance of $3.5 million. This is in accordance with the most recent ordinance and resolution that were adopted. I will stand for questions.
I have none. Any of the other commissioners have questions? Christine, thank you very much. Item number 2 has to do with first quarter budget adjustments. And for that, Christine is still here.
All right, once again, for the record, Christine Tandler, Budget Coordinator for the Ada County Highway District. Hang on, I need a pen. I'm here to present and seek approval for the fiscal 2021 first budget adjustments. Here is a summary of the expenditure budget. It is a balanced budget with the revenue, and I'll continue to go over that. We started the year with a budget of $135.7 million and are requesting an expenditure budget of $143.8 million. As you can see, encumbrances are nearly $4 million, and we have a decrease in our operational expenditures, and capital expenditure adjustments are increasing. Following slides, I will go over those details. But again, the proposed expenditure budget is $143.8 million. So on the operational side, we did begin the year with a $62.5 million budget. We have encumbrances from fiscal year 20 of $500,000. Some of the additional adjustments presented today is the workman's compensation adjustment. This is an adjustment from what was budgeted versus what is actually due related to our premium. Also an adjustment for the healthcare holiday that was taken in December when the district utilized reserves to pay for that. We also have a request for $120,000 for raised crosswalks on Sloan Avenue and Long Lake Street. These are both by elementary schools. This is kind of a pilot type project as recommended by our traffic crew, and so we will work to get those out to bid and built. We've also got $60,000 request for raised bike lane details. This is in response to the commission's request to do more on the raised bike lanes. This is to help our design team come up with some of those parameters. In IT, we have about $600,000. The director reported earlier about the school beacons. These are the costs of materials and software for that increase, as well as some networking type equipment. The UCS blades help the system run a little faster, and then the NetApp is the storage. We do have an adjustment for liquid asphalt down to the bid, came in less than we had anticipated. And the developers cooperative funds, this is something that's been budgeted in both capital and maintenance for several years. This is it's going to be easier if we can move it all to capital so that the development services team can manage all of it. So you will see this adjustment as an increase in the capital budget. And then there are miscellaneous operational adjustments of just under $30,000, making the total proposed operational expenditures $62.2 million. Excuse me. The original capital budget is proposed to increase about $8.5 million. We started the year at $70.4 million. We do have encumbrances from fiscal year 20 of just under $3.5 million. I'll hit some of the high points on these that I have detailed here. If you have additional questions, don't hesitate to ask. So the Cloverdale Road, Columbia to Overland Road Corridor project is just under $1 million. This is in anticipation of Idaho Power and moving and installing their big poles in the ultimate location rather than us having to have them moved once we do the expansion projects out there. This will save the district significant amounts of money, as it costs about $250,000 per pole to move. The State and Pierce Park Lane intersection, this is the net additional amount needed for the right-of-way on the southwest corner of the State and Pierce Park intersection, that convenience store. Fairview and Locust Grove and Fairview Locust Grove to Eagle Road right-of-way is moving into FY 2022 due to some redesign efforts related to the bike lanes and the modifications thereof. The Orchard Street realignment design contract was signed at the beginning of the fiscal year. Therefore, we are just truing up the budget to that design contract as it is. The residential capital maintenance. So this is a project that was in the budget. It was split into two parts due to additional segments, as well as the looking at the maintenance projects as more of a whole, critical connections. We're looking at ADA, crossings, safety, not just the maintenance aspect there, so it does require a lot more work in that parameters. USTIC Black Cat interim signal. This is one that once after the budget was adopted, we increased the scope to assure that the interim signal operates to the best of its ability. So we are adding, there's some right-of-way included in there so that we can add some turn lanes. Again, the development cooperative funds from operational is there. The increase for the downtown implementation project, this is our project that we're doing in conjunction with CCDC. The $365,000 is related to the increase from asphalt to concrete that was previously approved. And the pavement preservation and ADA, these are our federal aid capital maintenance projects. We anticipate needing an additional $500,000 of local funds. Now, we will seek reimbursement of that through Compass at year-end balancing, but as the SLA comes before the commission in the next few weeks, we will need to pay that amount, as that's the estimate right now. So we have a total proposed capital budget of $78.8 million. Revenue adjustments. Now, on revenue, I'm going to go over a little differently, just to help people get to what the numbers are. So the $126.2 million is the new revenue. That's revenue that we're anticipating to come in the door throughout the year. And our budget is $135.7. And as you can see, we have carryover funds from the previous year. We have rescheduled projects. We're utilizing some quarter reservation, and then the commuter ride budget. So that's what makes up our entire $135.7 million budget. But the weekly reports that are generated show the 126, because that's the revenue that we're anticipating to get through the door. The rest are reservation type accounts. We do have some one-time adjustments. We did receive $35,000 from the CARES Act. The cost share ITD traffic materials is related to the ITD project on Chinden, where they purchased their traffic materials from us. We had put the budget for the expenditure in, but hadn't put the amount in for the revenue side. And the cost share for the Costco STARS agreement is related to staff time, design, inspection for non-impact fee eligible costs for 10 Mile McMillan to Chinden. That project that was related to that, Costco will then submit that to the STARS program through the state. Project-related cost share, the two big projects here are 10 Mile in Amity, and that's Meridian Water, and then the Kaja Bikeway with the city of Boise. The federal aid project revenue is on the federal aid capital projects, we pay upfront for both design and construction engineering, and then are reimbursed at 92.66%. So we show the expenditure, and then we have to show the revenue on that side. We are proposing utilizing $2.1 million of priority corridor reservation and have a slight decrease in the commuter ride budget of $13,000. Again, this is a balanced budget at $143.8 million. So in summary, again, we started the year at 135.7. We're proposing the adjusted budget and the new adopted budget to be 143.8 million. And Resolution 2328 project tracking forecast is $3.3 million currently. Staff recommends approval of the first budget adjustments as outlined in the staff report. I will stand for questions.
I must say this is about the longest budget adjustment staff report in the last 6 years. And you are to be complimented about remembering all the details that you just gave us. Yes. I have no questions personally. Do any of the rest of the commission have any questions about the budget adjustment?
Mr. President, I have a couple questions.
Yes.
Thank you, Christine. Great presentation. I just have a couple, as a newbie, lots of questions. What is the Development Corporation Fund? And I think I heard it was from operations, or where does that money come from?
So the development cooperative funds, so is what happens is the developer's doing work or going through the development process, they'll enter into development cooperative agreements with us, and we'll pay them to build a road to help their development, but it is our road. The funds that are being moved from maintenance to capital are smaller in nature. They could be, additional pipe repairs, additional other repairs that zone inspectors and such see in the field that need done that are ECHD's responsibility. But if they've already got the trench open, then it's easier for us to just kind of piggyback on them, pay them to make that repair. This is just a way to get all of those developers cooperative together rather than some on the maintenance operational side and some on the capital side.
Got it. And then I'm just really curious, because obviously this is again my first time, with the revenue budget, it looked like it was, 99 million, behind the proposed original budget. I was just curious and then there's obviously more revenue that's coming in.
The 99 million, what?
Yeah, because it was 135, 126, and then 135. So I was just curious, is that normal to have that much carryover, that much, revenue coming forward with those other budget considerations?
Normal. So rescheduled projects is something that happens with projects that throughout the year get pushed and pushed and pushed. So it's a way to move those projects rather than waiting till the end of the year and encumbering them. We're showing that these projects were anticipated to be completed in fiscal year 20, but they are being carried over. A $4 million is not uncommon. Last year there was no normal, right? So there was a lot of shutdowns and a lot of delays in projects there. The carryover budget, those are funds that typically after second budget adjustments, which happen in July, if we find out there's high dollar items that we know aren't going to be spent that year and we want to put them in the next year's budget, that's why we do that. Again, we don't have a contract for that, so we can't encumber those funds, but we want those funds to move to the next fiscal year. In this case, the $549,000 was related, to fire suppression and TMC upgrades that maintenance is working on trying to get a bid for. That's been a little more difficult than they had anticipated.
Perfect. And then final question, what is the priority corridor reservation budget? And where does that money come from?
You answer this? Do you want to answer it? Gary.
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, Gary Inselman, Deputy Director, Development Technical Services. The priority corridor reservation is additional funds that the Commission established, a reservation account they established several years ago to be used on the priority corridors that were approved by the Commission and large bridge projects to kind of have a savings account for those larger expenditures in the future. And this is a utilization of $2.1 million out of that account to fund the additional expenses that were shown on the other slide.
So what fund, like what's the source of that budget?
It was additional revenue in some past years and cost savings in past years that were set aside for these anticipated costs in the future for the large bridges like the one we're building this year of Gowan Road across the railroad tracks and upcoming ones for river crossings and Linder Road corridor.
Perfect, thank you.
Does anyone else have a question?
Mr. President, if I could just follow up with Gary, the corridor preservation really is an opportunity for the district to acquire right-of-way in advance of the projects, and we can get that right-of-way with enormous savings through a development process as they come in. We know we're going to have a project there, and so those funds can be used to acquire that when we have the opportunity. There's a specific statutory provision in the Local Land Use Planning Act. It's called a futures map, and it gives the cities and county and ACHD the ability to identify those corridors and preserve right-of-way so they don't approve a development and then we end up having to condemn that development. So this is really a way to facilitate that. We've saved an enormous amount of money ever since we've established this program.
And in today's economy, that's a good thing. Again, are there any further questions or comments?
Mr. President?
Yes.
Yes, that actually follows up on that same point. I think it's important because we're, as a commission, going to be reviewing the appropriateness of the current corridors, 3 lanes and 5 lanes, at the end of March. I just have a concern that we will be moving forward, and they're identified some two new ones that would be moving forward on acquiring right-of-way, which is, I assume, where the $2.1 million is going. The Cloverdale right-of-way acquisitions, you got 2 of them there, and then the Locust Grove right-of-way acquisitions at $400,000. I would just ask that we not move forward on those until the commission has a full opportunity to go up to evaluate. Yes, past commissions have approved a master street map with certain configurations on roads. These are areas that have been developed as residential, and I think we're getting a lot of response from neighbors saying whether or not 5 lanes is really appropriate where it's purely residential. And so the question then is whether we should be even looking forward to, we should continue to acquire right-of-way in areas that we might actually not need it. So I would just ask that a vote in favor of this revenue adjustment does not mean that it's a vote in favor of moving forward on right-of-way acquisition in those areas that, as President Goldthorpe, you have raised. We have concerns about whether the current configuration in the CIP on a couple of segments is still appropriate.
Understood. And so in order perhaps to answer that question better in my own mind, I would ask staff this question. If we were going to change somewhat the configuration of, say, Cloverdale in our CIP to preserve for 5 but build 3, would that change the amount of right-of-way that we were looking at purchasing?
President Goldthorpe, commissioners, no, we would need the right-of-way that we're acquiring with this project in conjunction with Idaho Power to assure that we would not be paying to relocate those large transmission lines in the future. And they've already started that project, so it's critical that we continue to acquire that right-of-way and preserve that opportunity.
Well, that's what I suspected, and appreciate the answer. Thank you. So we've got some time here, I believe, Jim, and we're already having to do the utility project. So I'm not thinking that between now and the sometime in March is going to be critical in terms of authorizing and using the expenditure of those extra funds, especially if there's a chance that we're not going to be completely doing away with the right-of-way preservation. Oh, here comes Steve.
Mr. President, if I could, I would just, I know that by acquiring right-of-way in Cloverdale may be a different issue because of the power line, but for example, the Locust Grove, which should not be a major expressway. It's located in between Meridian Road to the west and Eagle Road to the east. It's right near a lot of neighborhoods that have already been built and anticipated to be not commercial, basically south of the turnoff to Mountain View High School. And so it just doesn't make sense to preserve it for 5 lanes. Now, I realize we probably already preserved it for 5 lanes in a lot of other places, but that's still tax dollars that is going to preserve for a right-of-way that's not going to be used. So I just want to make sure that we know in advance, before we purchase it, spend taxpayer dollars, we know what this commission has decided is the ideal configuration of a couple of Locust Grove in particular, because it is not anywhere near Meridian or Eagle Road in its functionality.
Well, I know we've discussed that particular stretch of road before, and with the city of Meridian as well as within the commission. So again, as with Cloverdale Road, I don't think that we're going to be obligating any additional monies that we've already discussed and approved with regards to the preservation. But Steve has a comment or 3. Go ahead.
Mr. President, Commissioners, again, Steve Price, General Counsel. This issue most certainly has come up in the past, and this most certainly isn't the first time we've heard of it. What I would suggest is that that in the near future that we have staff have a workshop with you to talk about those projects and the corridor preservation and develop, clear guidance on the direction you want to go, and we can implement that into our programming as we go forward. So that may be the way to give the assurance that everybody needs, but this is really money that wasn't spent that we're moving into this year, which Christine just told me, and this is really just a quarterly budget adjustment. We're just moving the money. We're not making a commitment in particular on those. You have to make those decisions, and if you're concerned about those, we can come back with you and have a full dialogue addressing those issues.
That's exactly what I thought. And
and the director just informed me it's already scheduled for the 31st of March for that discussion.
Okay, and that is the work session on all this? Yes, okay. So we've got the 31st of March already set aside for this, and as Steve just mentioned, we will not be expending those funds in the meantime. No commitment.
Good. Thank you. I'm glad that's on the record.
Yep. Any other questions, comments about the adjustment?
Mr. President, I don't have any comments or questions. I think it's appropriate what we're doing moving forward, and I would be ready to make a motion.
Then if Commissioner McKinney has nothing, we'll go ahead and say, Commissioner May, make that motion.
Thank you. I don't have any comments. I apologize for my tardiness.
We understand.
We're glad you're here, Commissioner McKinney.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mary.
So with that, Mr. President, okay, I would make a motion that we approve the fiscal year 2021 first budget adjustment as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the first quarter budget adjustment. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? The motion passes. Thank you very much. Item number 3 is with
Thank you,
regards
Christine.
to the Innovate Academy in Eagle. They're asking for a waiver, and staff will make the presentation.
I think so.
And thanks, Dawn, for being here.
Yes.
Because you opened it. Sure.
Good afternoon, President Goldthorpe, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Dawn Battles, Development Services. This is a decision briefing for Innovate Academy. This is a conditional use permit application with the City of Eagle and is before you today due to several applicant requested waivers of policy. The site is located on the southeast corner of Eagle Road and Mission Drive. This development is estimated to generate 186 vehicle trips per day, with 13 of those in the PM peak hour. The applicant is requesting approval of a conditional use permit to allow for a private school consisting of elementary, middle, and high school with up to 75 students within an existing 2,652 square foot building. The school is currently operating under a temporary occupancy permit issued by the City of Eagle. The City of Eagle previously owned this site in which they operated a community center. While the city owned the site, they paved the parking lot and part of the existing right-of-way for First Street without submitting civil drawings to ACHD for review and approval. The parking lot was not properly graded prior to paving. Because of this, there's private drainage running into the roadway, impacting ACHD's storm drainage system, and is not allowed per District Policy 8012.11, which states, private street stormwater shall be retained within the confines of the development site and shall not commingle with public street stormwater and shall not be allowed to discharge to the public stormwater facilities. The site abuts 3 public streets, and district policy requires improvements adjacent to the site as part of the development application. However, the applicant has requested a waiver of several of ACHD's policies and has requested not to make improvements abutting the site. The applicant has requested the following waivers: construction of a cul-de-sac turnaround at the terminus of First Street, making modifications to the parking lot to accommodate their drainage on site, repairing or replacing any existing damaged or deteriorated portions of curb, gutter, and sidewalk on Eagle Road and Mission Drive, and closure of the driveway from the site onto Eagle Road with curb, gutter, and sidewalk. Staff is not supportive of the applicant's waiver request of constructing a cul-de-sac turnaround at the terminus of First Street. ACHD policy requires that cul-de-sac turnarounds be constructed at the terminus of stub and dead-end streets that extend greater than 150 feet, as they provide a place for public, delivery, and service vehicles and ACHD maintenance vehicles to turn around. This segment of First Street is 520 feet long. Currently, the applicant is using a portion of the right-of-way for the cul-de-sac turnaround located at the terminus of First Street as a basketball court without permission from ACHD in the form of a license agreement. Additionally, the applicant has restricted access with candlesticks and a private property no trespassing sign within the public right-of-way of First Street. Staff recommends the applicant remove the basketball hoops and court striping located within the right-of-way. The applicant should immediately remove the candlesticks and the signs outside of the public right-of-way of First Street per Idaho Code 40-23-19, which prohibits encroachments that obstruct or prevent the use of public right-of-way, as has been done by the applicant. The license agreement will not allow for the encroachments that obstruct or prevent the use of the public right-of-way. Staff is not supportive of the applicant's request to not make any changes to the parking lot and drainage on First Street, as they are currently discharging private stormwater into ACHD's storm drain system. Consistent with ACHD policy, staff recommends that the parking lot be modified to retain the on-site drainage on-site. The applicant's waiver request for minor improvements does not apply to Mission Drive and Eagle Road, as there are no damaged or deficient portions of curb, gutter, and sidewalk on Eagle Road and Mission Drive abutting the site. Staff recently reviewed new information regarding the existing 24-foot wide driveway from the site onto Eagle Road, located at the southwest property line, has changed their original condition. Due to the driveway not meeting ADA standards, staff recommends the applicant close the driveway onto Eagle Road with vertical curb, gutter, and sidewalk. In addition to the requested waiver of policies, the applicant did not adequately address the items in the school site checklist. The school site checklist should provide information regarding pedestrian and internal site circulation, the need for pedestrian improvements, vehicle storage for pickup and drop-off, etc. A traffic impact study and a school site checklist are required per state statute for all new public schools, and as a standard practice, ACHD requires private schools to submit a school site checklist to ensure that any improvements needed to serve the school site are provided by the school and that we are providing consistent information to the land use agencies. To ensure that ACHD has this information and that improvements needed to support the school site can be made by the applicant prior to the fall 2021-2022 school year, staff has recommended that prior to the issuance of final occupancy, that the city require the applicant submit a revised school site checklist prepared by a traffic engineer, and that any recommended improvements be made prior to final occupancy for the school for fall 2021-2022 school year. Additionally, ACHD recommends the city require the applicant to make the necessary modifications to the parking lot to retain the site stormwater runoff on site as required by ACHD policy and the ACHD's Phase 2 NPDES permit issued by the EPA. Staff recommends approval of the staff report as written, and I will stand for questions.
Yes, let me ask you one. You just bumped into what my question's going to be with regards to. We don't just make this policy up about stormwater out of our top of our heads. I've been around long enough to figure that one out. I mean, this is federal requirements, correct?
President Goldthorpe, that is correct.
Okay, well, so that's the only question I had. Are there any other questions?
Mr. President, I have a question.
Yes.
I went through the report over the weekend, and I'm really thankful for this presentation. I am really glad to see that you're going to recommend that they do improve that driveway, because that was my question. If, is it ADA compliant and that sort of bit, and I was kind of concerned that there weren't any considerations for making it safer and easier for kiddos to walk and bike to that school, especially using the infrastructure that's in place with that elementary school nearby. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions?
Mr. President, it's the same issue that driveway on the driveway on the southwest corner of that lot. So is the staff recommending that there be a curb put there, or that the driveway be made accessible? If it's not going to be used as a auto vehicle driveway, there is value in having bike access off of the bike lane on Eagle Road. We've seen this in other areas where we've forgotten to consider the bike access, close off an old driveway or an old alley with a vertical curb, and then discover that the neighbors use that to access the property. So we can limit vehicle access there, but understanding that might be a good place to put in bicycle access, so that they aren't required then to access the property at the intersection, which is has much more conflicts. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Commissioner Hanson, we are requiring vertical curb, gutter, and sidewalk.
Right. So someone is cycling along that bike lane on Eagle Road, north on Eagle Road. Right now, there's a driveway cut, so they turn right, and now they have to cut across an open field to get on the property. But in the future, that might be an access point. By creating a vertical curb, we're forcing them, you cannot access the property anymore at that point. You actually have to cycle all the way to the corner where you have the ramp. And so my suggestion is why not preserve the access point at least without the vertical curb so that cyclists can continue to access the property there as presumably they're doing or they might be doing or in the future would be doing. And it'll save us having to then do another cut for cyclists in the future.
For the record, Mindy Wells, Development Services, President Goldthorpe and Commissioner Hanson. That is something that we could consider, and we would look for that type of information to be provided as part of that school site checklist, and perhaps that could be specifically addressed with this revised school site checklist that's provided by a traffic engineer, as staff has recommended.
That's great. That's just exactly what I wanted to hear, Mindy, because as we're looking at where all of our various bike lanes are and bike access points are, I think sometimes we're not thinking about, a cyclist might be able to access here. We don't have to provide access to cars in the same way, and this would actually add safety because that would avoid them having to try and access property at a point where there are more conflicts, which there would be up at that intersection. So thank you, Mindy. I would recommend that we look at that when we're doing the checklist.
Thank you. Commissioner Mayor McKinney, any questions?
I just wanted to, Mr. President, thank Dawn for her report, and I certainly support the recommendations that are going to be going forward to the City of Eagle. One main concern I had, and I'm glad to see that that recommendation is going forward, is the drainage. And this has been an issue out there that's been discussed with the previous administration, the current administration, and last year when it did flood, it was just such a mess and such a hazard. So I'm glad to see that we are recommending that this not be kicked down the road, as it would just have negative impact on the ACHD system and then in turn the taxpayers. So I do think that's very important. But thanks so much for your report, and I do support. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner McKinney.
I think all the major issues have been addressed, and I'm generally in agreement with what's been said.
Okay, I have been handed a note that we do have individuals wishing to testify. Is the applicant here?
They should be on the line.
Elliott, yes.
Okay, then we'll turn some time over to the applicant.
Am I able to share my screen?
I hope so.
Me too.
There we go. You should be able to now.
All right, can you see me now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, good afternoon. My name is Brittany Elliott. I'm with Hawkins Companies. I am here today on behalf of Innovate Academy. Hawkins Companies is donating our time pro bono to assist in the Innovate Academy waiver request today. My address is 855 West Broad Street, Boise, Idaho, 83702. And the first thing I'd like to do is say thank you so much, Dawn, for all of the work that you have done in getting this application before the commission today. It was an extremely thorough staff report. We really appreciate all the time and effort and questions that you have answered from us throughout this process. All right, as you can see, and as Dawn mentioned, the project is located over on the southeast corner of Eagle and Mission Drive over there in Eagle, Idaho. It's also known as The Landing. Innovate Academy purchased this property in August of 2020 from the city of Eagle. To date, all of the improvements that are on the property were existing at the time of purchase. I heard a couple notes in the staff presentation concerning pickup and drop-off of students. I just wanted to make sure that we all understood. The parents will come down Mission Drive. They will turn in to Innovate Academy, double stacked throughout this. The teachers will also be there at all times to assist the parents and students with that drop-off. School is not in session on Fridays. Drop-off in the morning is from 8 to 8:15, and pickup is from 4:15 to 4:30. Site-specific condition of approval does obligate us to provide a traffic study by a traffic engineer for the site-specific school checklist. We've provided a site school checklist. However, it was not done by a traffic engineer. We are a small private school without the necessary and exorbitant funds to engage a traffic engineer at this point. ACHD code 7106.9 looks like it draws on Idaho code 676519 subpart 3, which requires this for a public school. We are a small nonprofit school, and we would really request that this obligation for a traffic study be removed as part of our condition of approval at this time. Site-specific condition of approval 5 requires that we provide either a turnaround with a 45-foot radius or vacate that existing right-of-way. We have submitted a vacation request for North 1st Street on November 24th, 2020. The vacation request is identical to the previous one submitted by the City of Eagle in September of 2019, which we understand was supported by ACHD at the time. That Reiew request has since been rescinded. We're scheduled for a public hearing for that vacation on February 17th and March 24th. We held our required neighborhood meeting for that vacation in November of 2020. We also submitted our application to Idaho Power, and Idaho Power has no concerns. We've discussed with both the fire marshal and the adjacent neighbors to install a crash gate with a code or timed entry to facilitate any needed access to the property. We're in the process of reaching out to the Trash Republic Services. However, it is our understanding that the City of Eagle did receive their blessing for a similar system during their initial vacation request. And with that, we'd like to respectfully request that no cul-de-sac be required as described in section 3.c of the staff report. Site-specific conditions of approval 6 and 7 do require a license agreement for the existing basketball hoops and striping be removed until a license agreement be entered into. We are also requesting that that condition of approval be struck at this time. As you can see, the striping has been existing throughout for quite a while now. You'll notice it's right here on the portion of First Street that was previously paid. When the property was purchased in 2020 from the City of Eagle, the basketball hoops and the striping were all existing. The new owner was unaware that the striping and the hoops were not allowed by ACHD, and we request that the striping and hoops be allowed to remain in place with no license agreement. Site-specific condition of approval 9 and 13, both do require engineered documents. As you can see right here on the top corner, this was a picture of the site, an aerial taken in 2018, and in the bottom right corner, that's in 2020. All of the existing paving improvements were installed between 2018 and 2020. When the property was purchased by the current owner in 2020, it was under the assumption that the improvements were done through proper channels. Innovate Academy is a small not-for-profit school, as we've previously communicated, without the funds to engage an engineer. In the future, if the property is further developed or redeveloped, we would absolutely be required to engage an engineer to fix any sort of deficiencies that are found throughout that process. Currently, the site is housing a school only through the 8th grade. In the future, if that was to ever expand further, then we would be absolutely willing to engage that engineer to provide documentation and fix any deficiencies. And we would respectfully request that the drainage plans and recommendations deriving from those drainage plans not be required at this particular juncture, but when and if the property undergoes development in the future. And with that, I would like to thank you so much for your time today and your willingness to hear our waiver request. And I know it says I'll stand for questions, but I'm going to go ahead and sit. I also do have people from Innovate Academy as well here today to answer any very technical questions you may have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there Any other individuals from the applicant side?
Tracy Crane would like to testify.
Okay.
Thank you. Can you folks hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay, so my name is Tracy Crane, and I've also been dedicating some pro bono time to Innovate to try to help them get going with this.
Tracy, we need
pilot.
your identification and your address.
Oh, pardon me. Tracy Crane, 9599 West Fairview Avenue, Boise, Idaho, 83704.
Thank you.
So I've been also donating some time to Innovate in an effort to help them get this private school off the ground and running. And really what I want to talk to you about is something that's lost in the staff report, and that is what Innovate is, how Innovate came to be at Mission Drive, and where Innovate plans on going or would like to be able to go as this asset for the Eagle community. What Innovate is it's a small private school. It's intended to be a small private school, and it will always be a small private school. Right now, it has only elementary school students. As those students age, some of them, it may offer them middle school services. As far as high school plans go, that is really aspirational and far enough in the future that it's not particularly relevant at this time. There'll be no pressure from high school student activity on this property for several years, many years probably, if ever. Innovate bought this property from the city of Eagle, as Brittany noted, with the impression and understanding that when it was an operating community center and ACHD had taken, nobody had taken, in fact, any action to prevent that from happening, that it could function under essentially the same purpose that it's functioning now as Innovate. There's not a lot of difference between the church activities that were there, the community center activities, and Innovate's activities. It's a small number of people, and they come together and, you know, just engage in basically educational things. What happened then is we came across a number of issues. The most important from a financial perspective for Innovate, and probably the most important for the future of Innovate, is the stormwater issue. That alone, and that requirement imposed upon Innovate now, could be and likely would be expensive enough that it could spell the end of Innovate's presence within the city of Eagle. That's a lot to ask of a small private school, to go in and revamp property that had been previously improved by the municipality from which it bought the property. Innovate is not asking for a forever waiver of policy by any means. What Innovate is really asking is to be allowed to operate now under the conditions of the property as they are today, as they were purchased from Eagle, at its capacity, size, and configuration that exists today. Innovate understands that if it's able to succeed and expand to where it needs a larger facility or any other site improvements outside of maybe fencing, that it will have to come back to ACHD. And at that time, it will be able to, or ACHD would have much similar recommendations, and Innovate is operating with the understanding that at that time it will have to make those improvements. So in reality, what it's saying is, let us give this school a go now. If we succeed, like we want to, and we will get to a point where we need to expand, and at that point, we will have the success behind us and the wherewithal and ability to make these stormwater improvements that ACHD is requesting. The most likely way for ACHD to get those improvements is to let Innovate get to that point before it imposes upon them this requirement. If, you know, and ultimately that's what everybody wants. I heard from the commissioners that, you know, and this is a stormwater issue, so we do have some Clean Water Act implications. And if really the goal of the property and the goal of the commission is to have that constrained, then we need to get and enable Innovate to get to that point where it can do that. if this part of the waiver isn't granted and Innovate's unable then to operate on that property could sit vacant for a period of time. It may be sold to a different person. Who knows what its fate would be. But what certainly wouldn't happen is that these improvements would not be made. And so I just ask that you consider that and be cognizant of the fact that this is not a forever request. In the long vision of Innovate, this will be done. It will be done probably within the next couple of years. And if you have any questions for me, I'd love to answer them.
I do. I appreciate your presentation. As I was listening to you, my mind was drifting back to last year when we had a very similar situation over on near Black Cat Road and Cherry Lane with a private school. And let me ask you if I think I'm hearing right here. If you are required to meet these conditions, are you saying that you cannot operate as a school?
I'm saying that Innovate does not have the funds to make those improvements at this time. So we'd have to try to source the funds from elsewhere, and I don't know at this moment the likelihood of being able to do that.
Can I ask you why the owners have gone so far as to purchase property without knowledge of what the legal ramifications might be?
That answer in this particular case, I think, is fairly intuitive. They bought it from the city of Eagle as an operating community center with all of the improvements on it that it currently has. So, you know, that's why, or one of the factors in why the property was purchased for this purpose. They're looking at this. Now, the city of Eagle, I've learned and understand from this hearing that had some issues with ACHD, but we're not talking about what the city of Eagle, what they were thinking or where they were at in this process or anything like that. We're talking about the Innovate Academy purchasers who purchased it at auction. This wasn't an arm's length negotiated transaction. This was just a public auction purchase. So that's why. I mean, really the bottom line question, why would they buy this property not thinking they would have to do something to it? And that's because the city had made it into what it is today and was using it for that.
Well, I don't really know how to address that, because I know that the statutes that govern our actions don't allow us to put stipulations into agreements that say, if this happens, then you can make these improvements. If you make this much money, you have to spend this much on what the federal government requires. It just doesn't work that way. So I'm concerned that possibly you, and I don't know why, your applicant went to this degree of effort and expense without knowing the likely requirements of going into business. And that's my only comment. Thank you.
Commissioner, may I address?
You bet.
Okay. So the request is not for some conditional approval that the commission doesn't have the legal authority to provide. The request is for a policy waiver. The point that I'm trying to make, or would like the commission to consider, is that the school in its long-term vision of the property recognizes that it, or is attempting to grow and succeed. And when it gets to a point where it needs to do any improvements, we will not be having this same type of discussion. We will be having the discussion of, okay, we're not asking for a waiver at this point. And I don't know that you would grant one anyway, but at that point, they would be prepared to make the improvements. So that's really just let the school succeed, let it become established, let it generate the revenue, the ability to make these improvements, and then it will, because it'll be part and parcel to its efforts to expand.
I probably didn't make myself clear. We actually cannot do that. But unless I'm wrong, and I don't see our general counsel jumping up to correct me, Director Wong, you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioners, just to put this on the record, the comment that was made that Eagle has had an issue with the Ada County Highway District is not accurate. We have not had any impact on this project because we were not involved with the previous administration on this project. So I want to be crystal clear that no, we have not had an issue that was indicated because we weren't part of the process.
Okay, thank you. The other commissioners have any questions or comments for this particular testimony? I guess not. Oh,
We have another person to testify. Mr. Don Kostelic would like to testify on this item.
yes, that's what I was going to ask next. Thank you. Don?
Thanks, Commissioners. Don Kostelic, 3687 South Geckler, Boise. Points I want to make on this one. One, I support the change and upgrade on the southwest corner of the driveway to make it ADA compliant. I would probably clarify that a non-compliant driveway is not a reason to close a driveway. This one has adequate space to make both the pedestrian access route crossing the driveway compliant while maintaining the driveway. Now, ACHD may have other traffic safety reasons for closing the driveway, but the ADA compliance is the reason. Other ADA compliant features at this intersection that I think are important and something for the commission to consider. You have a $300,000 developers cooperative fund approved in your budget. The southeast corner of the Mission and Eagle intersection looks to be either non-compliant or borderline at best in terms of a pedestrian access route around the backside of the curb ramp. The pedestrian push buttons on at least two of the three corners of this intersection, and maybe all three, are not ADA compliant, thus not accessible to a child or a parent in a wheelchair or using another mobility device. And the west side of the crosswalk in front of the Eagle Elementary School of the Arts, that curb ramp does not appear to be compliant. So I hope you would consider a developers cooperative or other coordination to remedy this while this occurs. Related to the cul-de-sac, I think this is a bigger issue for the commission to consider, and it's one I see where cities and highway agencies often cut off their nose to spite their face. I think your maintenance staff can confirm that cul-de-sacs cost more to maintain over time. I believe you have to do a slurry seal treatment instead of a chip seal treatment, which costs more. This cul-de-sac serves only 8 houses. How many times a year are ACHD's equipment out there where this big turnaround is necessary? It's not really the fault of a small developer or a small property owner on the end of this street to have to make up for that, while none of the other 8 houses on that street have to pay for what happens there. And related to the basketball court, I understand the striping and the license agreement, but if basketball hoops on cul-de-sacs or streets are an issue to ACHD, you have hundreds of locations to police in that regard. I'd love to see the agency on school properties and others work to the concept of what's called play streets that many other cities are putting in place to help encourage this type of recreation and other things that can safely occur in the right circumstances within public rights of way. Is this the right location for that? I don't know, but just a concept to explore. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I let you go, Don, was it your intent? Do you have something else to say during public communications?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have no questions for Don. Does anybody else? All right, is there anyone else who wishes to give testimony on this particular item? All right, then, if the, yes, applicant, you have some more time for any kind of rebuttal. Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you very much. To reiterate everything that has been said, we're a small private school. We really were requesting the chance to flourish, establish ourselves, and also provide educational opportunities for the children throughout the community of Eagle. By granting waiver requests today, which would not be a forever waiver request, as Tracy pointed out, but they would simply be until we are able to come back in with future development plans that would really provide the students and the community of Eagle to maintain this small private nonprofit school. And we thank you very much. And with that, I would just like to request that you do grant our waiver request today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's testimony on this particular item. Is there any additional comment from any of the commission?
I just have a question. I'd like to some clarification from Brittany, if you wouldn't mind. So I'm trying to get a sense for what the access point is now, and I think you said that you've already talked to the emergency service providers regarding turnaround and access, and that they're fine with a gate or something that would allow them to access your property in the event that they needed it. Is that, do we have any of that in writing, or where are we on that?
I don't believe that we have that particular item in writing. We have had discussions with them, verbal discussions, and if I'm able to share my screen just quickly, I'll be able to pull up a quick site plan which should hopefully help illustrate the current access situation. So right now, there is access. It'll be an entrance through the westernmost existing access, and then they will be leaving through the easternmost access. One of the conditions of approval is that we put basically a do not enter sign on the inside of this and a do not enter on the exterior facing portion of the exit. Right now, there is nothing that precludes people from driving through North First Street. Simply safety for the children. That gate would be installed. That way there is no access through this portion of the property. It's also our neighbors' understanding that they're not looking for cut-through traffic access through here as well. So the gate that would be across here would be some sort of crash gate system, whether or not it has a code or a key, or it's on a timed entry, knowing that, say, trash services come between this time and this time. That's something that we would be working through with the City of Eagle and the regulatory agencies.
I guess that was my question, is what it looks like now and what the arrangements would be. I've seen lots of places where they have bollards that are there for emergency vehicles, or
we would not be looking at a bollard system in this location.
Okay. I see Mindy standing back there, and she's kind of waving back and forth like she's a little bit anxious. So, Mindy, did you have something to say?
Commissioner Goldthorpe, no, I just was able to answer Commissioner Hansen's question if need be. So unless you have anything for me.
No, thank you, though. Thanks for putting up with me. If there are no other questions or comments from the commission.
Mr. President?
Yes.
May I ask a follow-up question to Brittany about that site plan that you just showed, showing the circulation? Is that the circulation the way it's currently being done?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the vehicles enter from the west and are making a left-hand arc basically through the site. Is that correct?
Trying to do it on my hand. So they will be coming down Mission Road. Let me pull up that one more time. So they will come down Mission Road. This is Eagle. They come into Mission. They take a right-hand turn into the site. They'll continue south through the site, and then at which point in time they will turn around and come north onto, and then make their turn onto Mission Drive and continue on their.
So for pickup and drop off, presumably passengers leave on the passenger side of the vehicle, right? And so the children are getting into and out of vehicles, and they're moving toward this, I guess it would be the southeast side as we look at that plan. Is that correct?
Correct. So there's actually 2 buildings currently on site, both of which are being utilized. During pickup and drop-off, this is fully staffed with teachers, and the teachers ensure the children's safety, the traffic direction. They've been using this particular system since school opened, and it has worked without incident to date.
And so children are being dropped off, and they're going both directions relative to where the vehicles are. Is that correct? Or are they all going off to one side?
Some will be going to the building on the west, and some will be going to the building on the east.
Okay. But are they all moving away from, what's the street? The north boundary street? What's that called?
Mission?
Mission, yes. Are they all going away from Mission?
Yes.
Or are any of them going back toward it?
None of them are going back towards Mission. And what you'll see on the middle of this property, that's an old building that was that church that was there that is owned by the City of Eagle. The City of Eagle has since removed that building at the time of purchase from the property. So at no point in time are students going into this building in the middle as it no longer exists.
Oh, okay. Okay, so there's no building there at all?
Nope. Right now it is.
Okay.
The building is all gone. Last time I saw it, it was in the City of Eagle parking lot.
Okay, but you are operating your pickup and drop off with 2 lanes of vehicles stopping to drop off kids?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to be sure I had a correct idea of how that's working.
And many of the students who do come to Innovate Academy come from multi-student households, meaning that the parent who's dropping them off might be dropping off 2, 3, 4 students, sibling groups, especially throughout this process. And the teachers enforce all of the traffic regulations throughout the pickup and drop off. And as I said, it's been functioning beautifully since it's been going on, and they have been in-person learning.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question.
All right. If there are no other comments or questions of the applicant from...
Mr. President, I have one question. Sorry, Mindy. I just thought about
go ahead.
It's not clear where we are on the vacation request. I know that was the thing that hung up with the City of Eagle. They wanted to vacate, and it got processed, and then it didn't get processed. And so where are we? Is there still going to be a request to vacate that area that hasn't been used as a roundabout yet, but that ACHD owns? Where are we on that?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Hanson. So ACHD has received a vacation application. However, that is a separate application and approval process, and that will be before you at a later date.
Well, let me correct myself, Mr. President. And I guess the question might be for our legal staff too. If we make a determination to require basically the creation of a paved roundabout cul-de-sac, won't we be prejudicing ourselves in a subsequent proceeding as to whether it is vacated? So, I mean, they're obviously very connected, but won't this decision today predetermine when we gather other facts as to the public use and so forth of the vacation requests? So how do we deal with these two, and why aren't they being dealt with together? Because the rights affect one or the other.
Mr. President, again, Steve Price, General Counsel. Commissioner Hanson, that's a great point. And I don't want to underscore the importance of that. The necessity of having the school checklists. You know, this law was passed not too long ago that requires that we examine all of the different facilities to make sure that the kiddos, that there's necessary paths and facilities in place for the safety of kids that travel to and from the school, including, much of the discussion that was today. The condition in the staff report considers both the vacation as an option as well as the roundabout option. So if you look at one of the conditions, site condition 5, they can either construct a turnaround with a minimum radius of 45 feet or, prior to final occupancy, vacate the existing right-of-way for the cul-de-sac turnaround. So that's something that the staff has addressed in their staff report.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I just wanted to thank Brittany and Tracy for coming in today and sharing all this information with us. And I just had one question to Brittany. As the students depart the school parking lot onto Mission, are they being directed to go one way or the other, or do they have that option when they come out to either go down Mission or go back to Eagle Road?
You're asking staff?
I was asking, well, whoever can answer that, Brittany or Mindy.
Can you answer that?
Yeah, President Goldthorpe and Commissioner May. Typically, that's the kind of information that would be included in that school site checklist, which wasn't provided to us.
Okay, all right, thank you.
We currently, the parents are able to either make that left or that right-hand turn, either one.
Okay, thank you.
Personally, I appreciate how many questions there have been and how well vetted this application has been. But the time is now to turn this matter back over to the commission for discussion and a motion. Is there any additional discussion that you'd like to have, commissioners? Okay.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Mr. President, I have this question because the findings of fact in the staff report says it directs that we need to construct a cul-de-sac turnaround at the terminus of First Street. But we don't know if we won't have to, if we make a determination to vacate that, then that would nullify the determination of saying we need to construct a cul-de-sac at the First Street. So I'm just trying to figure out whether this is at the point that we can really make a decision. The checklist seems to make sense that there should be various things that need to be reported. As a special purpose district, we can't take into determination what might be used this time. There might be other uses in the future. It's really as to whether it's in the public interest to vacate a piece of property, but that's not before us. So I'm wondering whether we could move forward on this requiring a checkpoint, but without having them go through the process of constructing or initiating the expense of designing and constructing a cul-de-sac until we can determine whether, in fact, we're going to vacate that property. I think the issue on drainage is actually pretty clear. I think it's really important that regardless of what your use is, that other property owners aren't entitled to drain their water onto the streets. This one wouldn't either, and so I think that drainage issue has to be addressed. And but as to the terminus of that short road, it seems to me there's multiple choices that could be made. Maybe this isn't ripe enough for us to determine until we actually go through the process of a vacation.
Okay, my understanding from what Steve told us a few moments ago is that it's the applicant has the freedom either or to develop that cul-de-sac or to ask for a vacation. Correct, Steve? Yes. Okay, so we're not leaving it up to someone else.
Oh, well, but Mr. President, my question is that if we do decide to vacate, then that sort of determines it. That's determinative of what the choices are for the applicant. Or the applicant can assume, well, maybe there's still a chance that ACHD will vacate it, but then because of our determination in this hearing, we've weighed against as a finding of fact and supporting the staff report against vacation. So I'm just trying to figure out what the legal ramifications are if we actually make a determination that they're required to construct a cul-de-sac, unless they ask us in the future, and then we'll deal with that. But again, the timing of that aspect of this troubles me.
Okay, again, we're leaving it up in the staff report. We're leaving it up to the applicant to have the freedom to ask us for that application, which can allow them to go forward with the rest of the conditions, correct? Yes. Okay. Anything else, Jim? Is there any other discussion from the commission?
Mr. President?
Yes.
I think, just as a general comment, in listening to the applicant and considering the discussion in the staff report and the discussion that we've had, it looks like this is a situation where perhaps the applicant, got a situation that they weren't fully intending to get or fully aware of. Nevertheless, it looks to me like the staff got it right in how they analyzed this, that really when it comes to the stormwater as well as the other waiver requests, it looks to me like we're in a situation where we have to deny the waiver. And so that would be my, I think the staff got it right in their report, and I would be willing to vote in accordance with their recommendation.
Thank you. Steve, you look
Mr. President, I just wanted to point out, as you know, the commissioners know that in our policy there's specific section that has standards that an applicant has to establish as part of a waiver, and they did not do that as part of this application.
Thank you. Any other discussion from the commission? That being the case, I would put this before the commission, and I would accept a motion whether or not to accept the staff report or to grant the waivers. Do I hear a motion?
I move to accept the staff report.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? I hear none.
I'd like to vote no, only from the standpoint of my concern of prejudicing a future application to vacate.
Duly
I just want
noted.
that. The rest of the staff report I fully support, but I have concerns about it prejudicing a future action, a future right that the applicant might have.
Okay, for the record, Commissioner Hanson is voting no. The motion passes. We now are going into our public communications portion of the meeting, and it is my understanding that Mr. Kostelek would like to speak. Take it away, Don.
Thank you. Don Kostelek, 3687 South Geckler. I just want to bring up a couple things on the bike map that you have coming up. One, first, I think there's some really good advances made on it that several folks have been talking about for years, primarily recognizing that on streets like Milwaukee and Emerald, while there are bike lanes that were kind of squeezed in there because the curbs were set long ago, these are not the most comfortable routes, and those are reflected. I would like to hope that you would direct a correction a couple of roads, or at least how the moderate stress bikeways are done. If you look on your map, it says they are 5 foot wide. One, if you'll remember my tellus from the fall, ACHD does not have data on the width of its bike lanes. And routes in southeast Boise that I frequent, like Boise Avenue, have bike lanes that are narrower than the handlebars on a bike. Linden is another one of those. So the map designates those as moderate stress, which I would agree with. So maybe taking away the 5 foot lane designation on there would be proper. River Run is also designated as moderate stress, and in my opinion, should be designated as low stress. It's essentially an in-street extension of the green belt. It's an incredibly low stress route, so much so that people walk in that street due to COVID and the narrowness of the sidewalks that are there. Related to that, there was a discussion at the BAC because ACHD has included Boise Avenue east of Broadway in its calculation that 22% of the population lives within a quarter mile of a low stress bikeway. One, your own map you're about to approve calls it moderate stress, which I agree with. And two, that largely is because of the substandard bike lanes that exist along much of it. So I hope those things can be improved. Lastly, on your legislative agenda, I fully support your efforts to close the loophole on the vehicle registration fees. I think, and maybe you can ask the staff, I'm not aware that ITD pays anything to ACHD for your traffic management center staff that manages traffic cameras on the interstate, Broadway, Front, Myrtle, Chinden, State Street, Glenwood, Eagle Road. And if you look at the recent project at Boise Avenue and Broadway, ACHD spent nearly $350,000 in its own money to make major safety upgrades to an ITD intersection. Further, if you look at your maintenance agreement with ITD and just look at Front and Myrtle, you are responsible for paying for striping and crosswalks and signs and sidewalks and all those other things. They only have to maintain that road. I fear that ITD will not side with ACHD in improving your financial situation, despite them constantly telling the legislature, we need more money for transportation. I hope that's not the case, but I think you know the reasons why that might not be. Thank you.
Appreciate those comments, Don. And with regards to our bicycle map and our designations, that is, as you know, a very much a living document and subject to lots and lots of amendments. But thank you for bringing that to our attention. Is there anyone else who would like to offer some public communication? That being the case, the meeting is adjourned. And we'll take a 5-minute break and then go into our work sessions.
Okay.
Revenue bonds?
Yeah, that one and that one, both of those. Thanks.
Oh, it's until
Ceiling lights are down.
Good. Okay, I think our 5 minutes are up. So we'll round up the rest of the commission and get going. Oh, I see him. We're good to go.
Well, Mr. President, if I could, Commissioners, it's my privilege again to introduce Lobby Idaho. They are our lobbyists, and I shared with you last night. This is their second year with us. Last year was a transition period based on the explanation I gave you yesterday, and they have been doing a tremendous job on ensuring, as you've seen, we are well advised and briefed on all actions going into the lobby. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jason, and I'll turn it over to him if he's ready to go.
Thank you.
I'm ready to go. I want to make sure can you guys hear me okay? I'm never sure I'm off mute.
You might want to speak up a little bit.
Okay, I will speak up a little bit. Is that better?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, President Goldthorpe and members of the commission. It's my pleasure to be here speaking with you today virtually. I'm sorry that we aren't able to meet in person, but appreciate the opportunity. As the director said, we have been working with the commission now for over a year, and I think that this is the first time we've had an opportunity to speak with you. So thank you for that opportunity. If you want to go to the second slide, I thought since this was our first time, we would just introduce ourselves real quickly. Lobby Idaho is it's a government relations and lobbying firm here in Idaho, and we work with we have multiple clients. We work on various issues. This is the ninth legislative session that I've been working as a contract lobbyist. Started back in 2012. Partnered with a guy named Skip Smizer, who represented ACHD previously, and we started our firm. Skip has since retired, and I've brought on another person to work with me, Carly Foster, who I'll allow her to introduce herself here in a moment. As way of background, so like I said, I've been a contract lobbyist now, heading into the ninth legislative session. Prior to that, I was chief of staff for Governor Butch Otter. I started working for Governor Otter after his election in 2006, after the end of his first year. So I started from 2007 through 2011, was the governor's chief of staff. And before that, I ran the government affairs program for Micron Technology. I was at Micron for 8.5 years and 5.5 years running the program, doing the work for the company, both in Washington, D.C., internationally, and managing our state's programs. I also managed just the state of Idaho program there for the first 3 years I was at the company. Before that, I was helping out with Congressman Mike Simpson's first election to Congress in 1998. I was the deputy campaign manager of his campaign and did the political fundraising for it. And before that, I worked for Governor Phil Batt. I was in his office for the 4 years he was in the office, working on various issues there. And prior to that, I worked on his campaign. So long history, grew up here in Idaho, an Idaho native, and looking forward to working with you all. Carly, why don't you take a moment to introduce yourself?
Great, thanks, Jason. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Carly Foster. I have now been with Lobby Idaho. This is my 6th legislative session, and I am an attorney by trade. I am a lifelong Idahoan, born and raised in Caldwell. I still live out in the Wilder area today with my husband and son. And like I said, I am an attorney. I graduated from the inaugural class of the now no longer here Concordia University School of Law, and was a successful graduate of the bar exam in July 2015, admitted to the bar in October 2015, and then was able to get started with Lobby Idaho right away. It has been a wonderful opportunity for me. Prior to joining Lobby Idaho, I also worked for the Canyon County Public Defender's Office, so I do have some experience in the courtroom, but I like to say that I was more born to be a policy type attorney than one that works in the courtroom or does any sort of corporate counsel or anything like that. In addition to working at Lobby Idaho, I am also the executive director of the Idaho Governor's Cup Scholarship Fund. We are a 501c3 organization that releases and awards scholarships to Idaho high school students attending Idaho colleges. So that's just a little about me.
Thank you, Carly. If you want to go to the next slide. 2020 has definitely been a year that has been extraordinary and different for many reasons. And we did a lot of work during the last several months that I think provided some useful information to the Commission. We provided real-time updates and information regarding the state's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And as we went through the various stages of recovery and as the state went through various stages of the emergency order, provided real-time information to the director on that and tried to get answers to any questions he may have as well. We also had provided updates on both the primary election and the national elections, at least for how those would change the makeup of our legislature and change the focus of issues that would be going on as we headed into the next legislative session. And then, of course, did a lot of preparation work and going over the various legislative ideas as we prepared for the 2021 session. You want to go to the next slide? As an overview to what I believe you all have probably seen or already read, the priorities of the legislature coming into 2021 are kind of you can take them into 3 different areas. There's been a lot of focus on examining and reforming the state of emergency orders in Idaho, looking to update statutes related to that and making sure that they are consistent with practice, and then also looking to provide some limits and maybe even revoke some of the orders that have been put into place. That's taken up a lot of time of the legislatures, or been a lot of their focus in the first month they've been in session. Actually, this is the 4th week, so they haven't even been in a month yet. There also is a lot of talk in regards to the legislative balance of power with the governor. There's some policy proposals to expand the legislature's role in dealing with statewide emergencies, and there's also a proposal for the legislature to be able to call itself back into session under certain guidelines, which would require a change of the state constitution. And then finally, I think that there's a lot of focus on the legislature looks to do a lot of work related to fiscal priorities. There's proposals from the governor to spend state surplus dollars, which is record number of surplus dollars on various infrastructure infrastructure projects, everything from water projects to airport projects to transportation projects to expanding broadband. He's got a series of proposals that are out there looking to spend surplus dollars in those areas. And then there's a series of proposals related to transportation enhancements around the state. Those transportation enhancements include spending some of the surplus dollars on transportation projects, both from the state and local governments, but then also looking to increase funding for transportation on an ongoing basis will be a priority of both the legislature and the governor. And then finally, there's several proposals to look at tax relief in various areas. There's been discussions of lowering the income tax, discussions of lowering sales tax, discussions of lowering property taxes. All of those will be focuses of the legislature as they move through the 2021 session. But if you go to the next slide, the legislative priorities that we've worked on with direction from the Director, General Counsel, as well as feedback I believe that they received from the Commission prior to putting together this list, is we've actually drafted legislation and are looking to propose in all of these areas. The first piece is a proposed legislation to expand public facilities that are eligible for impact fees. There's also a proposal to propose legislation to remove the width requirement of sidewalks outside of city limits. Legislation for enhanced penalty for running a red light, which is something we're looking to hopefully see some success on. There's a proposed amendment to the Local Land Use Planning Act for highway district facilities to hopefully allow for continued use of the salt shed that you've invested in there next to your corporate headquarters, commission headquarters. Legislation related to railroad maintenance and the area. Next slide. Proposed legislative amendment to authorize vacation and exchange for this vacation and exchange in the same transaction. Legislation to amend the definition of highway to include public transportation, bicycle, and pedestrian facilities may be spent by the district for use of funds. And then proposed legislation that clarifies ambiguity in a law in a change that came around last year related to funds within an urban renewal district. Those have all been dutifully drafted by the General Counsel, and if there was anything specific you wanted to know in regards to those, I'm sure that he could answer them, but we are in the process of getting those put into legislative format and looking for introduction hearings in the next week.
Jason, could you go back one slide? Okay, I didn't see anything with regards to vehicle registration. Here comes Steve.
For the record, Steve Price, General Counsel, Mr. President, Commissioners, that is a great question. And if Don Kostelik's on the line, we most certainly are very focused on getting rid of the quote loophole end quote relating to the 8,000-pound vehicles. In discussion with leadership at the legislature, we, as you know, a couple of years ago, we tried to get rid of that loophole, and they have requested that we meet with the leadership at the Truckers Association, who are the ones that oppose that. The director and I, as well as Lobby Idaho, are facilitating a discussion with the Truckers Association. We've had some preliminary discussions where we think that there's room for us to move forward. We had the meeting scheduled, but Mr. Hodges, I believe he had some personal problems as get that done, and you remain focused on that. We got your message, and I want you to know that your team's dedicated to try and get that done.
I appreciate that. And so along those lines, I have a question for Jason, and please don't take this any more personal or whatever than it's intended. It's just a very serious but curious question. is how are you going to be able to represent both sides?
So, Mr. President, I think that Steve could address that if you needed to, but prior to my working for the commission, we identified 2 of my existing clients that may present some kind of a conflict of interest in the future. And in the contract, there is provisions that say that should a conflict arise, I will not be able to represent ACHD, and you could sever my contract completely or just remove me from working on that specific issue.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, we didn't have Lobby Idaho the last time we went forward. We feel comfortable if we need to hire another contract lobbyist for just that specific matter, but the director and I most certainly feel comfortable in us tackling this and going forward through the legislature on it.
Yeah, I actually feel very confident that we can handle it ourselves.
Yes.
So thanks for saying that.
Yeah. As long as we can get Jason out of the way, we'll be fine.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question, Mr. President. I don't take that personally at all. I think it's important to have issues like that dealt with up front so that there's no problem down the road. So,
well, you probably saw Mr. Hodges' article, the editorial or opinion in the Press Tribune, and I don't know that you saw my rebuttal because I haven't seen it in the press, but can I ask you what you thought about both of those?
I think it demonstrated that it's an issue that deserves a lot of attention.
Very tactfully answered. Thanks.
The last part of my proposal is what is involved in a lot of work at the legislature is that we monitor proposals by third parties. During the legislative process, several pieces of legislation that will have impact either directly or indirectly to the district and are presented, and we try to bring those issues to the attention of the director and staff early so that they can review it and we can see if there's an opportunity to either change it or minimize its impact if it's negative, support it if it's positive, change it, or even try to defeat it if it's very negative. So that's a lot of the work that we are doing. We have been tracking several pieces already and will continue to do that as we move forward throughout the process. With that, Mr. President Goldthorpe, I don't have anything else in my presentation. I appreciate the opportunity to present at your work session and we'll be happy to answer any questions. That's the last slide.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Yes.
Hi, Jason. It's great to meet you. I have a couple questions. I'm not familiar with the railroad maintenance legislation. Can somebody provide a little bit more history for me on that one?
Sure, Mr. President, I can. Commissioners, the road maintenance, over the years we've had a lot of problems with the railroad company in terms of maintaining the public right-of-way at crossings. The railroad has a 100-foot setback in both directions from the railroad, and they are not maintaining that. They won't let us necessarily maintain that. To have any communications with the railroad is very difficult in those circumstances. And so this is a piece of legislation that requires them that within their area that they'll be required to maintain that portion of the road, as opposed to right now it's unclear. But one thing is clear is that they don't like us doing any maintenance activities within their setback. And so we're caught in kind of a conundrum where it's our road, it's their setback, they don't want us maintaining, and this is to make sure that it gets maintained, that they do it.
Thanks, Steve.
I would like to provide a follow-up. Recently, just as an example, Jason and his team, the engineers are at it again, and they are trying to amend the QBS legislation relative to how we hire professional engineers and architects and the like. And he was able to get that bill And Jason and I have sat down and negotiated with them. We got the necessary amendments to make us comfortable with the legislation. They've agreed to make those changes, and everybody's going to go forward happy. So that's one of the important services that they provide. But the other important part about a contract lobbyist is that when you have a good team and a good firm, is it acts as a deterrent for any legislative efforts that may negatively impact the highway district. And that is not anything that we can put a metric on, but I can tell you, I've been doing this for the better part of 25, 30 years, that deterrent is really a big part of the lobbying game.
Question for you, Steve, because since we're on the railroad, did you tell Jason about the last experience we had going in front of the House for a report, and then before we could get to the Senate, the railroad's lobbyists had fabricated a really nice fairy tale about why we were there?
Well, I don't remember the specifics of that, but I am not appearing shocked either, so.
Yeah, you just have to watch out what they say about what we're up to. If you don't hear it from our mouths or what we have in writing, it ain't true.
Well, and the commission needs to know our project management staff. Whenever we have road projects that impact railroad crossings, it is a monumental effort to work with the railroad to get the necessary work done for our projects. And I can't underscore the level of difficulty, but hopefully through this legislation we'll have clarity and we'll have better communications. Jason's already helped us out on a couple of projects by contacting the railroad's lobbyist, and we were able to get a project moving. So that's another service. It doesn't necessarily mean that the Lobby Idaho is just on the legislature. They also have relations with many people that we deal with and have the ability to have a separate line of communication whenever we have problems.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason. Anybody else have questions? Yes.
Yeah, I just want to, hi Jason, hi Carly. It's great to have you guys on the team. Thanks so much for your presentation today. And I just wanted to make a quick comment that how much I appreciate your updates. I mean, it's almost like simultaneous with the minute that gavel hits the block, we've got an update from you guys about what's just happened and what's coming down the pike. So it's very appreciated. And so thank you. It's good to see you.
I appreciate that. And I think that Carly deserves most of the attention for that. She does great work.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Yes, I also want to echo that. Tremendously helpful to get those reports. Jason and Carly, I know that the most important asset is your relationships with folks up in the State House, and that's a tremendous asset that's often undervalued. It's a strange place to navigate, and things happen on a dime up there, and you don't know it unless you're there and you have the right relationship. So I really appreciate that. My question is to do with, I know there are negotiations going on regarding funding, that there tends to be a small group of people who work on it and do much of it's like inside the room where it happened. They decide what it's going to look like. The core bones of this funding, transportation funding will look like. And then the rest of us, the rest of the world sort of gets to weigh in at various points. Are you in the room where it happens? Are you right there participating, or is there a way you can help participate so that there's a sense of what this is going to do to the choices that local governments have?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. There are, I'd say there are a couple groups right now. I don't think it's coalesced into one group, and we participate in a couple of them and communicate with the others. And yes, we are already working on some proposals related to how funding will flow to locals. As you know, I think that there's the governor outlined his plan for yesterday to several lobbyists in regards to, and other advocates about how they wanted to spend their surplus dollars, and they have a desire to have it flow to the local units of government in a certain way that, unfortunately, ACHD doesn't necessarily fit into the box, because they want to divide up a third to the cities, a third to the counties, a third to highway districts, and I think that makes a challenge to see how we fit into those categories, as well as kind of the mechanism that would distribute it. So we're in negotiations now, or I shouldn't even say negotiations, we're in discussions now about trying to come up with some equitable means to make sure that all the money that flows to locals happens in a manner that is fair and equitable to everybody that will be receiving it. So yeah, we're involved in those discussions right now. It's ongoing, it's fluid, and I think that as we come to decision points, we'll be sure that the commission leadership and the director are aware of those and getting an opportunity to weigh in as available.
That's really helpful. I think you understand that the more flexibility we have, the better we can do to serve the taxpayer. And the more strings that gets attached, it's a irony is that there's a frustration that the feds attach strings, but then we turn around and attach strings to local areas. But it's in the neighborhoods and the local businesses where the rubber hits the road. And the more flexibility that we have in being able to make those choices to provide a maximum return to the taxpayer, the better. And so I really appreciate that you are sort of being aware of where some of those strings could be snipped and eliminated. There's always somebody who has a bone to pick with a city over here, or a county over here, or a school district over here. Next thing you know, there's some sort of a line item that limits the discretion at the local level, and that's so important. The other is, of course, that Compass is lobbying in the legislature and at the federal level, and I was just wondering how closely you work with our Compass lobbyists. We are 20 years behind in really providing multimodal transportation, and I think it's going to become very apparent this year, as at the federal level, there's going to be a greater ease with which communities can access money for transit and high capacity transit, and we'll just be left out because we don't have the local authorities, local match to take advantage of that. The Fed always operates of, hey, we'll give you resources, but you have to there's got to be some skin in the game, and we don't have that. And so we're going to be another 20 years behind, and the cost to the taxpayer is going to be enormous. And meanwhile, those same federal dollars are going to go elsewhere. We're in a position, we have the plan, we have the capacity to move forward on transit, especially high capacity transit. And so making sure legislators understand, don't cut your nose off to spite your face. Make sure the local authorities can really take advantage of what's a major shift. It's been a shifting on the national level, mostly with population shifts, demographic shifts, but I think we're going to see it significantly over the next couple of years in this new administration.
So have not directly coordinated with Compass's lobbyists on a regular basis. However, the director and his team have provided us with documents related to their priorities and kept us in the loop related to the activities and what they're going to be working on. And we are prepared to do that when and if the time seems like it's appropriate for us to engage. Right now, I will say that I think that having 7 or 8 pieces of legislation to try to move through the legislature is a pretty heavy lift in and of itself. And so we focus primarily on that load, as well as dealing with the transportation funding issues to date. But I know Compass's folks, and we can definitely assist and work with them as closely as we need to, as well as most of the other representatives from local government.
Yeah, well, I think all of the things we're promoting actually are quite connected. For example, the flexibility of our statute and impact fee statute and the others is very tied to our ability to participate. And so spend some time with Ken. I would encourage that so that you're saying and reinforcing the same things, because I think you are.
Yeah.
Just being a little more systematic and efficient. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, then if there's nothing else, we'll go thank Jason very much and Carly very much for the presentation, and we will go to our next work session, which is ACHT service fees, funding limitation, and authorities. And this is bikeways. Hey, I skipped one. Sorry, Edinson. We're going to go with the bike map.
Should I share it? Or sorry.
Yeah, sure.
And share all the screen,
You
right?
can just share this full screen.
Okay. Good afternoon, Commission. My name is Edinson Bautista, ACHD Senior Transportation Planner. In today's presentation, we would like to present to you an update to the ACHD bike map and provide a brief overview of the updated process. Back in 2009, with the adoption of the original Roadways to Bikeway Master Plan, it was identified the need of the development and distribution of a county-wide bike map. The first iteration of the bike map was developed in 2014, with several updates. Additionally, the bike map has been enhanced by incorporating it into an online format. 2018, the ACHD Commission adopted the addendum to the Roadways to Bikeway Master Plan, which updated several components from the original plan, including the development of bicycle facility selection matrix and definitions, update of goals, objectives, and performance measures, develop a prioritization criteria, and define a regional and low-stress network. Just to provide a few examples of the history of the bike map, the first iteration comes from the 1976 Urban Bicycle Route System for the Boise Metropolitan Area Master Plan. And here's what it's like, the first official map intended for public use. The 1994-1996 ACHD Ada County Ridge to Rivers Bikeway Map. And in this slide, we present the most recent hard copy map examples. And finally, in this slide, I wanted to highlight the regional bike network identified in the Roadways to Bikeway Master Plan. For this project, we're looking to update the 2017 ACHD bike map printed and online version. ACHD will continue to develop a user-friendly map that maximizes safety, provide connectivity, and support cycling as a viable option. Additionally, this update look into the implementation of the 2018 ACHD Roadways to Bikeway Master Plan Addendum and its recommendations. This update, ACHD worked in full coordination with the Bicycle Advisory Committee. The update of the bike map consists in the addition of the low-stress network, the addition of the new bicycle facilities like buffer, protected, raised bike lanes, and cycle tracks, update of the key destinations and bike-related facilities, and update of the bicycle definitions and resources as defined in the Roadways to Bikeway Master Plan Addendum. Since the beginning of the project, we have worked in coordination with the Bicycle Advisory Committee. As part of this review, the committee members were able to provide feedback on different elements of the map. In this slide, we wanted to provide some example of the feedback received, which include comments related to bike routes, specific corridors, difficult crossings, and the map legend. With the bicycle facility audit planned for later this year, the bike map is planned to be updated with the findings identified through this assessment. The bike facility audit is expected to be completed in 2021. Full coordination with the Bicycle Advisory Committee will continue through this project. As part of this work session, in your commission packet, you will find a draft bike map. As next steps, we are planning to update the online bike map and establish routine updates as needed. Taking into account this year's bike facility audit, We're also planning to conduct additional updates to the bike map to include any findings identified through the update. If a final draft will be prepared and continue with printing and distribution of the map. Finally, we will continue coordinating with the Bicycle Advisory Committee throughout the bike map update. With this, I conclude my presentation. I will stand for any questions.
Edinson, I just have one comment, and that's I've been sitting in on the Bicycle Advisory Committee meetings for a while now, and since the last few months when there have been more opportunities for their input, I've been grateful how you and Christy have instilled a sense of urgency so that there have been no delays in our timetable. Thank you.
Mr. President, I have a couple questions.
Yes.
Thank you, Ensign. This is really exciting. I just have a couple questions, or one main question. I see, I'm really excited about all of the amenities that are listed in the map and in the key here. I was just curious if, I mean, I noticed that their hospitals are listed. Was there any thought to put urgent care or other types of health facilities? Because I'm thinking of folks that are using this map. I don't think they're going to be bicycling to the hospital traditionally. So are there other types of clinics or anything like that that was discussed, and would you be amenable to sharing that with the BAC as a potential recommendation?
Mr. President and Commissioner, yes, urgent cares were taken into account when looking into the hospitals. Countywide, we look at we looked into the different locations, also highlighted that we're also highlighting through the neighborhood plans that we're incorporating into our civic facilities database. So, in short answer is yes. And the Bicycle Advisory Committee has had an opportunity to look at those locations as part of this update as well.
So yes, then I guess, right? So, okay. And I want to make sure that it's expanded beyond urgent care, because I think urgent care is a nice way to kind of list a lot of different types of organizations that are doing the same thing. So urgent care, federally qualified health centers, whatever. If you need to talk to me about what those types of organizations might be and fall under that bucket, I'd be happy to do that.
I thought you were just going to say that you needed the urgent cares because there were so many guys falling off their bikes.
Or they get hit by cars.
Yeah, that too.
Commissioner Pickering, Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, thank you for that point. We'll do a review of those locations. I don't know if we included some of the items that you just specifically addressed, and we can check into that and see, and bring that back to the BAC as a potential addition. I imagine you're thinking of community health centers and other opportunities where individuals are seeking public services, and we can look into that.
Thank you, Justin. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And I don't want it to be too busy, but I think that's a really critical amenity that people want.
Big maps. So
Yeah. And then I know we're in an earlier stage, but I would love to see this map being printed and distributed and making sure that it's in Spanish and all that good stuff. So I know once you bring it back to us, I'll have lots of questions about printing and distributing. So yes, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to echo the kudos to Edinson and Christy and the staff working with the Bike Advisory Committee. I've seen each of the iterations of the map as they've come out, and they just get better and better. I use it as a real useful planning tool too, and this one is even better because when you look at it, you realize, oh yeah, there are the high stress routes, there are the moderate stress routes. And it's like, it's not just on paper, it's actually right there in the neighborhood. And that helps us to determine, well, what do we do about it? How do we help people get across those high stress routes and arterials and so forth? So it's a really good planning tool. It's not just for cyclists who are currently looking for a route to take. It's a good planning tool for the neighborhoods, for the city, and for ACHC. Thank you very much.
Mary or David, any comments? Then we're good and very appreciative, Edinson. Thank you. Now, for what I introduced before, the service fees, funding limitations, and authorities presentation.
do the funding one. Mhm. Sure. Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. Again, for the record, Steve Price, General Counsel. I was requested to provide, again, for some of you, and some of you first time, a presentation on really ACHD's revenue. And so here we go. We're going to talk about ACHD service fees, revenue limitations on ACHD's revenue, and bonding authority, which has been an issue in the past. First off, as some of you know, there's two different types of local governments. There's a general purpose government, which are the cities and the counties, and then you have special purpose governments that are taxing districts that are created by the legislature for a specific purpose. ACHD is a special purpose government. This is a quote that helps create an understanding of that distinction. This is a case from the Idaho Supreme Court. A highway district in Idaho is not a political municipality. It's not created for governmental purposes, but is limited in both its purposes and powers to the construction of highways for the benefit of the inhabitants and the property within its borders. This has broad implications over how we work. So just as kind of an overview, this is all the different ACHD general revenue sources. You have basically a 3-year average, and it lists all of those, and we're going to be going through some of these. The first one we're going to talk about, as you'll note, is we have quite a few fees on there, and there are limitations on how we collect fees. I'm going to postpone that. Our service fees are really, there's a whole broad area that we require fees for, permits and all kinds of different fees, license agreements, development review fees, plat review fees. But in charging those fees, the amount of fees charged by ACHD must be reasonable and rationally related to the purpose for which they are charged. We can't just have an arbitrary fee and charge for a bunch of money. The Idaho courts will generally uphold an ordinance setting fee amounts unless the ordinance is clearly unreasonable or arbitrary. They must be rationally related to the cost of enforcing the respective regulation and cannot be assessed purely for revenue generation, so we can't just go crazy. What we do, what Gary has done in his area, is we do a cost analysis for a particular program that we charge a fee for. We get all of those costs, and there's a formula that he follows to make sure that our fees are reasonable and that they're supported. Any fee or other forced contribution by the public at large to meet public needs or otherwise generate revenue will be considered a tax. So that's why we have to do that, which would violate Article 1, Section 5 of the Constitution. And Commissioner Pickering and Commissioner McKinney, we went over that a little while ago. The reasonable test or fees test is it must be proportionate to the services rendered by the governmental entity. And again, that's what Gary does to do that. But at the end of the day, we're just trying to cover our costs. So I'm going to now go into revenue limitations. You got to look at all of our different revenues. The Idaho Constitution and statutory law only authorizes us gasoline taxes, highway distribution account, which includes gas taxes and sales taxes, registration fees, both state registration fees as well as ACHD registration fees and property taxes, and they are limited for the construction, repair, maintenance, and traffic supervision of the public highways. The Constitution and the relevant statutes are worded as a limitation of power rather than a broad grant of power. The rule of law in Idaho is that where special funds or revenues are dedicated to a particular purpose, the same cannot be used for any other purpose, and any attempt to do that would be illegal and unconstitutional. So now we're going to look at what the Constitution says about gas tax and state registration fees. Article 7, Section 17, there's a specific provision that was adopted back in the 40s, and it says here that any tax on gasoline or fee for registration shall be used exclusively for the construction, repair, maintenance, and traffic supervision of public highways. You're going to hear me say that phrase a whole bunch because it's everywhere. And basically, again, another limitation, no part of such revenue shall be by transfer of those funds will be diverted for any other purpose whatsoever. Wow. Now we're going to get into the revenue limitations on the highway distribution account. The state policy is, it is a declared policy of the legislature that, except as otherwise provided, all highway user revenues accruing to the state highway account be spent exclusively for the maintenance, construction, and development of highways and bridges in the state highway system. Apportionment of those funds to local government, there are several provisions, but this gives you further clarification. Again, shall be used for highway and bridge maintenance and construction. No part of highway funds or apportionment shall ever be used for any other purpose other than provided in this section. And again, maintenance and construction of highways. The expenditure of the applicable funds, the commissioners and board of commissioners of each highway district are empowered to expend all or any portion of monies received by them from the highway distribution account in cooperation with the state of Idaho or U.S. or both in the construction of highways and bridges. Property taxes. One of our largest sources. This code provision says that the commissioners of a county highway system, that they are empowered for the purpose of construction and maintenance of highways and bridges under their respective jurisdictions. The levy rate is 0.2% of the market value for assessment purposes for construction maintenance of highways and bridges. We can do a special levy, which is 0.008% of the market value of the assessed property, and again, it identifies the limitation as being bridge maintenance and construction, matching state and federal highway funds, secondary highway construction, secondary highway maintenance and improvements, and maintenance during an emergency. This is our limitation on the property tax levy rate. Right now, in 2021, our levy rate is that number. Our legal rate, you can tell we're substantially below at the legal rate what we're entitled to charge on property taxes. And we're, if we did a special levy, you can see how that number falls in. Now for ACHD registration fees, we're the only highway district in the state that has the authority to do that. There have been some that tried and failed recently, Kootenai County, I believe. Anyway, the local highway jurisdiction in the county shall use the funds generated by an increase in vehicle registration fee exclusively for the construction, repair, maintenance, and traffic supervision of highways within their respective jurisdictions, and the payment of interest and principal and obligations bonds, for example. In our statute, authorization for voters to approve the registration fee, we must use the funds generated by a vehicle registration fee exclusively for the construction, repair, maintenance, traffic supervision of highways. What this is all saying is that we're a special purpose government and we have to use our funding for these basically four important areas. What it also demonstrates that when all of this was set up probably 100 years ago, that they only viewed highway districts as being responsible for motor vehicles. And times have changed. And so we need to change as well, and we're making an effort at the legislature to redefine some of these terms so that we can go in different directions. And that's been the direction of the commission.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Yes.
So this isn't related to this particular topic, but it connects to registration fees. So I heard on the campaign trail a lot from folks feeling that, you know, the influx of folks moving here and paying that registration fee, they were asking me, is there a legal way for ACHD to impose a higher registration fee on folks that are from out of state that are moving here? Is that legally possible?
Well, it would violate the Interstate Commerce Clause and the Equal Protection Clause. But we did try a couple of years ago to increase that, and this relates to Commissioner Goldthorpe's interest in, within that provision, there is an exception for vehicles that don't have to pay an ACHD registration fee for vehicles greater than 8,000 pounds. And we're most certainly looking at that. So any questions on fees or revenue and the limitations that are required by law? Okay, good. Now we'll get into bond law. What is ACHD authority to issue bonds? I did this presentation a couple of years ago. This was Commissioner Goldthorpe wanted to explore, you know, what does it take to get a bond done? And so I tried to modify this presentation, and I'm going to kind of zip through it. So if you have any questions, it's boring. To say the least. There's a lot of weeds in all of this, but I'm going to try and zip through it. We've had a long afternoon.
Steve,
So,
I'm sure you're going to get to this, but what's the high-level comparison between a levy versus a bond?
oh, well, a levy is the amount, the levy rate is our ability to get property tax at a certain level. And a bond, great question. The only way that we can pay a bond under our authority is through the repayment with property taxes. And so the levy rate, the levy is most certainly goes in conjunction with the ability to repay. And if we don't have sufficient property tax to pay a bond, make the payments, the annual payment, then we can increase the levy rate to do that, to pay that back, or we can use other general revenues, but we first have to use property taxes. So there's some entities that will opt to increase, instead of using other revenue, they will just increase the levy rate and get more property taxes that way. So does that answer your question?
Yes, I'm sure I'll have more questions.
Well, the levy is really the way that we can increase to get more property tax or decrease. And the property tax is the way that we would pay a bond off.
Got it.
So what's our authority to issue bonds? The commissioners see this presentation before. They know that the statutes in this area are really poorly written. There are a lot of ambiguities, but if the commission ever sends us in that direction, I think we have enough where we could do it, but we may want to go and get some legislation clarifying. At the end of the day, so we're going to talk about what's our authority. Well, there are two statutes that give highway districts authority to issue bonds. Highway districts are authorized under Title 40, Chapter 11, states that every highway district is granted the authority under Article 8 of the Idaho Constitution to issue negotiable coupon bonds. Well, this is one of those areas where Idaho Code doesn't even anywhere talk about what a negotiable coupon bond is. So we don't know what that means. But we think it just means general obligation bonds. Highway districts are also authorized to issue bonds under Chapter 2, which is what municipalities go for. You have a revenue bond. We're not authorized to do that. If we can't do it, I won't talk about it, but we can do a general obligation bond. It's a more general indebtedness that is going to be repaid with property tax revenue. That's why levy matters. And it's secured by the ability to the taxing power if there's a shortage. So that would be the instance where we would increase the levy rate, as long as it's within the authorized limit. For what purpose can we get a bond? Well, for any authorized purpose. That's what the statute says. But again, that would fall back to what our statutory or special purpose is, and it would have the same limitations as property taxes, because the property taxes would be repaying the bond. But it really doesn't give any further guidance. For what purposes may ACHD issue bonds? Well, there's the Title 40, Chapter 11. In that particular authorization, it gives us 6 reasons, and there they are, which is a little bit broader, but again, it all relates down to our purpose of building, rebuilding, maintaining, and constructing highways or traffic supervision. Again, how can we repay them? Property tax, be repaid with property tax assessments. The assessments can be made against all the property within the district as well as property inside a special district. And we'll get into that in a minute, but ACHD has the ability to create a special district. If they're insufficient, the money must be paid out of any monies in the general fund of the district. A sum sufficient to cover the deficit shall be levied and collected in the next and succeeding year. So if you're short one year, you can go to other revenue, but you have to increase your levy in the subsequent year so that you'll be using property taxes. Here's an example of how a bond works. You got a 20-year, $100 million bond at 3%. I think this was Commissioner Goldthorpe's example. Those are what your monthly payments are. Your annual is about $6.6 million in principal and interest. Total payments over that period of time is $132.77 million. So you know what your interest is, which is about $32 million over a 20-year period. These are some of the prerequisites. In order, if we did it under the Title 40, Chapter 11, this is what the process that we would have to go. I'm going to kind of fly through this, but these are the things that we would have to do. Again, this is more very similar in how we do it. These are all the things that we have to do. These are the weeds I was talking about. So it's a long and lengthy and expensive process, probably just bond counsel loans $1 million to get through all of this. How I know is when cities go for bonds. It's a very expensive process. Bonds that exceed ACHD's current year revenue, they have to be approved by 2/3 of the voters living within the district, unless the underlying expenditure needs to be made to address an urgent need such as public safety. The indebtedness qualifies as an ordinary and necessary expense in parlance with the constitutional debt limitation. So under the Idaho Constitution, Idaho's kind of archaic this way. Every governmental entity can't adopt a budget or do anything, contract, create any obligation that goes beyond the annual year. So, and if you do so, it violates the Constitution. Now, let me be clear about that. So, for instance, if we entered into a multi-year contract to do something, that would be kicking in Article 8, Section 3, because it would be creating an obligation beyond the fiscal year. You can't, the idea is that the commission can't obligate future commissions for those debts. And there's exceptions to that rule. One is that you can, if you get 2/3 votes of the people by a long-term bond, or if the expense the obligation that you're creating is ordinary and necessary expense. And we do this. For instance, a great benefit to the taxpayers is we have these long-term leases on our equipment. And these leases go beyond the annual year. And we had to establish that that equipment is an ordinary and necessary expense. As long as it goes towards maintaining your existing infrastructure, it qualifies. With the Curtis Road extension, a number of years ago, they tried to establish that they wanted to incur an obligation for that extension. And it was challenged in court by two former commissioners, Commissioner Baker and Commissioner Arnold, and it was found that it was not an ordinary and necessary expense. Boise City, for instance, built the Boise Airport parking, and it was challenged in court. They argued that it was an ordinary and necessary expense, and the court found that it was not. Courts are very, very stringent on how to interpret the ordinary and necessary. Right now, there's a case right before the Idaho Supreme Court with the Auditorium District and some of their obligations that they've tried to create, and it's being challenged that it is not an ordinary and necessary expense. I don't think I've ever read very many cases recently where the courts have found it to be an ordinary and necessary expense. They are very much against governmental entities obligating beyond an annual year. But if we did, and we thought we had something that would qualify for an exception, one thing you can do is go seek judicial confirmation to that effect. Then a judge gets to decide. So you can either go to the public or you can go to the court. Again, you have to get voter approval required for multi-year indebtedness. These are the things that has to, comply with these statutes. It has to be very clear. Again, the Article 8, Section 3, there's the constitutional provision that says you can't incur in excess of the income and revenue provided for debts and liabilities in such a year unless they first conduct an election and secure voter approval of the proposed expenditure. Again, that's with 2/3 of qualified electors. Right now, the legislature is considering two bills to tighten this requirement. So, the ordinary necessary expenses, this has always been something that we've been very much involved in, just in terms because we try and use it as much as we can. If it is an ordinary necessary expense, we don't require voter approval. Again, that's an exception. But those are the standards of what the expense is to be ordinary. It's ordinarily course of business, the maintenance of property, and that's how we do it with our equipment. And so the next question is, well, is it has to really be tied to your statutory responsibilities. Then the next question is it necessary? And the requisite is there are threats to public safety, the need for repairs, maintenance, and preservation of existing property, or a legal obligation to make the expenditure without delay. So there we exercise it as saying that it is necessary because of our maintenance needs for our existing infrastructure. But that's an example. With the indebtedness exception, the voter approval isn't required. This is when you can go to a judge and have them make a determination that it's ordinary and necessary. Again, here's a ballot measure. When you go, you have to the general nature, but not the exactly what it's going to be for. There's actually legislation this year to make it very specific as to how the bonding revenue is going to be, or the bonding money is going to be used. The statement on the ballot does not need to include a line item. Rather, it should include a general purpose of borrowing money for the general purpose contemplated. This may change. That's really a reflection that you've seen a lot of bond elections going out, and there's been some buyer, or I should say voter remorse over the bonding proposals, and so the legislature wants to make sure that the voters have a clear understanding of how exactly that money is going to be used. Again, this is the judicial confirmation of an ordinary necessary expense. If we had a big project like the Curtis Road example, you can, instead of me signing a letter giving a legal argument, the bonding council, I've issued an opinion for our leases, but if we were going to do it for a project, you would want to get judicial confirmation that it's an ordinary necessary expense, and this is the process to do that. Again, this is just more of the judicial examination and determination of the validity of the bond. Okay, this is the property tax. Again, I just wanted to remind you of what our levy rate is, and you can tell that we're well below what our maximum levy rate is. And to do that, you would need 4 out of 5 commissioners to change the levy rate. You could do a supplemental levy, which is a levy in addition, and we're authorized to hold an election with the Highway District. The voters can determine whether or not to increase the levy, so it's a special levy takes a voter approval. You can go out and get the public to agree with the supplemental levy. We have to determine whether the existing levy is insufficient to accomplish the purposes of the levy. The majority vote is required, so it's only a majority, it's not a 2/3 vote is required to increase the levy beyond the statutory 0.2%, and the levy increase can't be more than 20% of the levy authorized by law, which is that 0.002. We've never, in my knowledge, we've never done a bond or a supplemental levy. We have another source of revenue. It's a special sidewalk assessment. It's specifically only ACHT of the highway districts can do this. And we can do it by general ordinance. You can have assessment for the construction, repair, replacement, or removal of sidewalks deemed dangerous or unsafe. We did it a number of years ago. I think Chuck Winder did it when he was a highway district commissioner. A bunch of people showed up with pitchforks and shovels and were very upset by it, and they abandoned that special assessment. Over time, today, as part of our sidewalk program, ACHD picks up the costs, generally all the costs for sidewalk that are when there's a safety related issue. Before, we had it where the property owner was required to pay for those costs, but ACHD over time is we really alleviated a lot of headaches when we just decided to pick up the costs, and I think the commission at the time determined that the number annually isn't that big. If the sidewalk repair isn't related to a safety issue, then ACHD and the adjacent property owner into a cost share where it's 50-50. Now, if the safety issue relates to something that the property owner did or was within their control, like a tree or smashed it with equipment or something and they broke it, then they would be responsible to replace the sidewalk. ACHD also has an LID authority, local improvement district. We can create those. What it does, the money again has to be utilized for the construction, reconstruction, and maintenance of highways and accompanying curbs and all that stuff. And so you could do a big road project, and I think the only LID that I recall, there have been proposals in the past for others, but Emerald, for instance, between really Maple Grove all the way out to Cloverdale was done through an LID. They're subject to legal challenges. The people that within the improvement district, there are locational limitations on who can be assessed a lien on their property. It's usually, how far away they are from the project, how much benefit. So there's an enormous analysis that has to get done. But that levy would go against those properties that are going to get the benefit of the improvements. That again was done on Emerald. Mike Brokaw, who we named this auditorium district, it just about drove him crazy to administer that. In fact, he used to have hair, and after Emerald was built, he lost all of his hair. But it's very difficult process to administer, but it works, and we have the authority. There are some highway districts that don't. We have a general property tax revenue source, kind of the ability where we can levy and collect taxes specifically for the payment of comprehensive insurance, payment of litigation expenses, payment of judgments and liabilities, or the payment for emergencies and calamities. And so this is kind of a safe harbor that with all of our other revenue, something really unusual happens, then the highway district can levy to collect those taxes to repay those four types of obligations. The special tax district, again, the district can go into an area and say, okay, we're going to create a special tax district. We're going to make all these different improvements. And it's like an LID, and then we're going to assess the properties within that district to repay. You create a levy to repay those obligations. But the difficulty of this is you can't have a special tax levy until the highway's been completed to at least 1 mile of all the land within the special district. The highway has been accepted by the district board, and the highway cost has been certified, and all the proceedings have been taken as specified. Well, that's in the statute, but the idea is you got to go do it first. You got to have all the improvement made, which takes money, and then after that, you can really create a special district to get repaid through a special levy. Never done that. Of course, you guys know impact fees, probably more than you want to. And I did a presentation to the new commissioners, but here's just a few slides on that. Here's the current impact fee revenue, our existing deficiencies. We have 28 road segments, cost of $112 million. And we've, this is an increase of 10 segments over our 2012 CIP. Currently, we have 244 projects totaling $957 million. That's 12 projects per year at $48 million per year of impact fee eligible projects. Our current budget is $32 million per year, and $330 million of the $957 million is for non-impact fee eligible costs. And so we have to, Justin and his department, and Sherwin and the team have to commit an average of about $16.5 million per year in the general funds to the CIP projects to build out the CIP. And I think we got through what the general revenue, why it's required as part of the impact fee program, and that is to cover the cost of existing deficiencies. And with that, I will stand for any questions. And
Steve, I remember
Did you make it?
the last time you gave this, you did one other thing, and that was to show what some of the severe limitations were in the amounts we could raise through some of these bonding facilities. And you don't have to do that now.
Yeah, but that's true. Once you get to the 20% cap, it really, you can't just go get 500 million or 300 million. That limitation really shrinks down how much we can get. And by the way, that example I gave you assumes that 3%. I don't know what the current bond rate is. I didn't research that, but I suspect it's going to be somewhere in the 2 to 3% range. I think it'd be less than right now. I mean, I just refinanced my house at 1.99, so there you have it. But it's cheap money out there.
Thank you.
Mr. President?
Anybody else wish to grill Steve?
Yeah.
Anybody?
Steve, I have a question. This is kind of an opinion question. Looking at all the different funding mechanisms that are out there and the sources for funds that ACHD has, and then of course keeping in mind the huge, sort of the backlog of deficiencies that we know we have, things that we know we need to do. The one big question that comes up to my mind and to the minds of just the citizens and residents is, what is likely the best avenue for ACHD to get additional funds to meet these needs? I mean, I recognize that our budget today is bigger than it was last year, and last year was bigger than it was the year before. And of course, taxpayers are always, not happy to pay more. That's fairly typical. But if ACHD wanted to get more funding, what are its best options?
That's a fair question, Mr. President and Commissioner McKinney. We've looked at that's really the silver bullet. And I have a diagram and I can send it to you, and I didn't include it in the presentation, but there are some sources of revenue that are within ACHD's control. And there are some revenue that are within the state control. And there's an analysis that shows, which are which. Obviously, user taxes or fees are really the best to fund transportation. A property tax is a regressive tax in that regard. And so since we get most of our money from property tax, that is something that's within the control of the highway district. You can set your levy rate. You can increase that. But politically, that's been, at least with past commissions, has been not a favorite thing to do to get more revenue. And so if we don't increase our property tax, which is within our control, either through changing the levy rate or taking our 3% in growth every year, then we have to look to the state. And that's why we're up there at the legislature trying to get have the legislature increase gas taxes, increase registration fees, increase sales tax, and get the state to commit to put their state general revenue into the highway distribution account. So that takes the state to help us get more revenue. And of course, the state, it took them about 15 years just to increase the gas tax from 1998, about 6 cents. It doesn't look like they're going to do that this year. So we have to look at surplus revenue, which there appears to be a large amount. We have to get in there and fight like, a pack of lions to get our share. So that's really our only two ways. One at the legislature through the highway distribution account, gas tax, sales tax, registration fees. The other way that we can, is that we can increase our voter registration, ACHD's voter registration fee, and we have done that, and we have tried. The necessity of the 8,000-pound limitation would increase, one, it would help us get an increase, and two, it would increase our revenue that way. And so those are the two things that are within our control, property tax and our own registration fee. You have the ability to do, again, increase your levies if you so desire on property tax. But otherwise, we have to fight with the state to get increase in funding. Now, we always hope that there'll be money for a local option sales tax, for transit, and related road projects. We continue to have conversations about that. That would be a new funding source. Our other ability, of course, and that's in Justin Lucas' department, and that's federal aid, and we've got a full-time person who goes out there and is, pounding the earth to try and get more federal funding. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I think.
I'll send you that chart that shows the separation of who makes the decision whether we get what source of funding.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to see that.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, and I've got another one coming up that's more riveting.
Oh, good.
I do.
Good. I didn't bring a pillow. No. But now we're going to hear from Christy.
Well, I get to start off a little bit.
Okay.
No, I've got another one.
Can't help it. It's like that.
If you recall, commissioners, and for the new commission, you won't recall, but we did a presentation to the commission regarding development review. And so as part of that, last time I did a quick snapshot of the development review in terms of the law, and then Christy's going to come in and really clarify everything. So first, development starts within the land use agencies, and the Idaho Local Land Use Planning Act, actually it's practically the first paragraph of the act, and that's to ensure adequate public facilities and services are provided. That's the land use agency's mission. We tried to, out through the Blueprint for Good Growth, to address many of the growth-related issues in sprawl and the like. We tried to get an adequate public facilities ordinance passed. It did not ever get adopted by anybody. ACHD is not governed by the Idaho Local Land Use Planning Act, only the cities and the counties. And there's a ton of case law that finds that as well. The city and county plan, this is their responsibilities, is they have to worry about property rights, and they want to make sure that whatever's necessary for the land use policies, restriction conditions and fees don't violate property rights, and that you can get a technical analysis through the Regulatory Taking Act, which we've talked about. Is when they're developing their comprehensive plan, you'll see school facilities and transportation, as well as transportation, what's in red. And this is where we come in. We're only one piece of the comprehensive plan, and the transportation component we're involved in. Again, the component requires that an analysis be prepared in coordination with local jurisdictions having authority over the public ways and streets, showing the general locations and widths of a system of major traffic thoroughfares and other traffic ways and streets, and recommended treatment thereof. And so we're the ones that really write that portion of their comprehensive plan. We had an unfortunate lawsuit with one of our partners a number of years ago related to USTIC, and Judge Neville entered his decision, but it clarifies the responsibilities. It is the city's responsibility to prepare a comprehensive plan in coordination with the highway district, which has authority over such public rights-of-way, not that the city and highway district share the authority to plan and design public highways. Really a finding that two jurisdictions can't have concurrent jurisdiction. Again, this is what the land use agency, in terms of what they can with their zoning ordinance, but they have to provide for the mitigation of the effects of a subdivision development on the ability of the political subdivisions of the state schools to deliver services without compromising the quality of delivery service. And part of that is to charge impact fees. Fees established must comply with the Idaho Development Impact Fee Act. Denial of a permit or approval is subject to a regulatory taking analysis. And when we get a land use application, the agency as well as ACHD, we have to process those in a timely manner. This is the provision that was referred to earlier about public schools and the need. This is a new statute not too long ago. Well, now it's a long time ago, but it requires a full checklist analysis to make sure. A lot of schools were being developed and land use agencies weren't making sure that there was adequate transportation facilities for safe alternatives for kids to get to school. And so this statute, you can tell it's specific, and that's what they call the checklist. And this is what our staff makes sure that we get that analysis done, and it's very important. If we're going to approve or deny, it has to be based on standards and criteria, and the nature, whatever the nature of the decision, standard or criteria allows the decision shall identify aspects of compliance or non-compliance with relevant approval standards and criteria in a written decision, and that's what's in your staff reports. Again, this kind of gets down to our findings of fact and conclusions of law. The denial has to, or authorization shall be in writing and accompanied by a reasoned statement that explains their criteria and the standards considered relevant, states the relevant contested facts relied upon, explains the rationale for the decisions based on applicable standards, and it has to be contained within a record. Now, this is quasi-judicial stuff. And whenever the commission, your staff reports that are presented, they do all that. But when the commission goes outside whatever the staff report provides, then the commission has to provide on the record their findings of fact and conclusions as to why they don't agree with the staff report, or if they do, or they want additional conditions. The commission has to do that, and then we can amend the staff report and submit it to the land use agency. So failure to do that, an applicant can get through the land use agency judicial review. ACHD decisions are not really directly subject to judicial review. What happens is our decisions get incorporated within the land use application. It would go to judicial review and we would participate through there, but we can't be sued directly for those decisions unless we violate some other right. Again, this is more have to be based upon sound reasons and practical application of recognized principles of law, and if you don't do that, they can get a regulatory taking analysis. This is our platting authority. We're the only highway district in the state that has plat signing authority. You've seen this before in terms of what we look at for proposed development. Our section 7200 does all that, has our technical standards, what is applied as our law in a decision and as applied by the facts that are presented. The KMST case, if you look on in our agenda, this was a decision because ACHD is not within the Local Land Use Planning Act, that the city and county have the final authority to approve or reject a proposed development, including the final authority to implement conditions relating to a transportation system. We don't this is from a lawsuit. ACHD does not obtain jurisdiction over the streets until the developer deeded the street to ACHD. So when we accept a road, we're taking ownership, and it's really for maintenance reasons. Because of this decision, we have intergovernmental agreements with all the land use agencies now that we will indemnify the land use agencies if they get sued and they've imposed the conditions of our approval. And that's how we get it done. Here's an example of the Impact Fee Collection and Development Review Agreement. This was with Ada County, this one's with the City of Boise, and these will come to you occasionally whenever we need to get those updated. We all know about exactions and impact fees. Exactions for on-site improvements. Impact fees are off-site improvements. Again, this is just a reminder about the mitigation of the conditions of approval as well as fees. Those are really our two methods. Here's kind of a quick review of we get an application, goes to the land use agency. They send it to us, our development services team, Chrissy's going to go over, looks at the plat. This only relates to plat, not some of the other development applications. We apply 7,200. We provide comments on the plat. The land use agency accepts the plat, it returns to us for our engineering to review the final plat, and the commission approves the final plat. Idaho is really a preliminary plat state. All of the rights are established when the commission approves a preliminary plat. The final plat's really an afterthought. It's just to make sure that the developer did everything that it was required to do, all the conditions in the preliminary plat. So we're responsible, again, for all of our highways, including public easements and roadways within subdivisions. A lot of people really don't appreciate that most of the public rights-of-way are in easements, not in fee simple. Owners of land may dedicate streets to us on the plat. ACHD is approving those plats and make sure that they meet our requirements. The dedications aren't valid. It won't become ACHD until ACHD approves the road and accepts the dedication. And if we don't sign the plat, then it will end up either being a private road and it won't be part of ACHD's road system for maintenance. So, development services, it's responsible for reviewing all the different types of applications, street improvement plans, and the construction and final plats to ensure conformance with our standards and conditions. Of course, Christie's our department manager, and Mindy Wallace is the supervisor over planning review and development review. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Christy. I just wanted to say one thing, and that is, let me get to the end of this. 40-1311 basically says that you have a duty as commissioners to keep the highways in their system in proper repair, but it's qualified within the limits of the funds available to the highway district. So you can only do what you can do with what you got. And with that, Christy, do you have any questions on?
I don't. Anybody else? Nope. They're saving them all for Christie.
This one. Okay, now we're sharing. Good afternoon. Oh. You guys want to do that one again? It was so riveting.
I think I learned it all in one go.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Well, Steve and I gave this tag team presentation to the commission. It was almost a year ago to the date. So for some of this, For some of you, this will be review or reminders. Feel free to stop me along the way if you have questions. I promise I won't talk as long as Steve. So today is just a very high-level basic overview of Section 7100 in the development policy. So Section 7000 is all about development applications and what we review and what our policies are, and then how we review plans, etc. So this one section, though, is what we're going to talk about. And this is just about the applications that are transmitted from the land use agencies to ACHD. So those applications of want to build a new fence, want to build a duplex subdivision, etc. And then it also includes the preliminary and final plat review and approval. So this is just a list of types of applications that we receive from the land use agencies. We typically get, over 1,000 development applications to us for review every year. Now, a lot of those are design reviews for changing the color of paint, maybe minor land divisions, accessory dwelling units. So I would say probably 2/3 of applications actually require some sort of written response from ACHD. We can talk about this in more detail at another time, but you'll only see a handful of those as the commission. So staff can approve applications except for those requiring waivers and certain modifications of policy, or if we have neighbors that want to come testify, or anyone that wants to come testify, or if the commission wants to hear it as well. So you won't see all 1,000 of these. You'll see very few, hopefully, as we try to work things out ahead of time. So just the general, annexation and rezone, comprehensive plan amendment, conditional use, design review, certificate of zoning. Of course, all of these have different terms depending on the land use agency. So ACHD has different roles depending on the type of development application. For annexations and rezones and comprehensive plan amendments, we are purely a commenting agency. But we do provide the land use agencies with a report and all with the same information. So that includes information about the impacted streets. So that will be traffic counts, width, ped and bike facilities, and types of improvement. Is there a curb, gutter, and sidewalk? If we have enough information, we'll provide an estimate of trips. Oftentimes for those annexations and rezones where it's a little bit too early, but the city really appreciates that information with the estimated trips. If the land use agency required a traffic impact study, then we'll provide a summary of that review. Now, ACHD also has policies about traffic impact studies, but for these types of applications, it would have to originate as a condition through the city. Then we'll provide them, just as in the staff report you saw today, with facts and findings about relevant policies specific to this location. So that would be about the frontage improvements, if there's stub streets and connectivity that they need to be aware of, generally what street widths, if they're planning a master plan, generally street sections and street widths, and then of course access management. So they might not know where their driveways or their streets are going, but we spell out what our policies are so that as they get into their site planning, they have some direction. And so we refer to these then as potential requirements. They're not site-specific conditions, but if you develop, here's some policies that will be applied. These are the types of applications that ACHD is a recommending body for. So these are all applications where, again, we'll provide the same information that we've provided with the annexations and rezones. However, under these types of applications, ACHD can require the traffic impact study if it's warranted under our policies. And then instead of probable conditions, these are site-specific conditions of approval now, as you saw in your report today. And we do have agreements with the land use agencies that they will consider incorporating ACHD's requirements into their approval. And then the one type of application that we can approve fully is under under Idaho code, we're granted authority to approve or deny plats. And this lists what we can look at. So continuity, the highway pattern, roadway widths, drainage, which is a big one, right-of-way standards, traffic volumes. So again, with these types of staff reports, it'll be all of the same information as we provide in all of the others. But in this particular case, the site-specific conditions of approval are our conditions, and by statute, we can implement those. I'm going to go back to preliminary plats. Just bouncing something off of what Steve mentioned, we did have a preliminary plat that came to the commission probably 15 years ago. And we took testimony, lots of neighborhood input, and at the end of the meeting, one of the commissioners made a motion to deny the preliminary plat. Everybody else, well, not everybody, got enough votes to deny the plat, but he didn't provide a finding. So I don't like it, is what the commissioner said. And so, I remember it clearly because the attorneys made me go meet with outside counsel, and I had to try to defend why we denied the plat. So it's always been a good reminder to me that we need to back up our findings with policy. In that particular case, they came back through with a new application, and we avoided court. Yes, and we approved the plat. And then with final plats, every agency approves these differently. Some agencies actually require a hearing or a consent agenda item. For us, it's really just an administrative approval. We're not going to sign the final plat if they haven't constructed the improvements or demonstrated and provided financial surety that they can construct the improvements. So that's why for us it's administrative. We're not adding any conditions. And actually the director and president of the commission are the two that can sign the final plats. My staff provides a letter and an overview of the original report and the plat to show that what conditions were required. But this typically isn't something that the whole commission will see. So I was short and sweet, but in the future we'll definitely dive into those policies and any other topics you'd like to explore with us.
Mr. President, just a quick comment.
Yes.
Thank you, Christy. My ears perked up, particularly when you talked about ADUs. So I'm just fascinated to know more as we dive a little bit more into all the different ramifications and things that are working on, that you guys work on that don't come to us. And thank you.
Sure. I guess President Goldthorpe.
Yes.
Commissioner Pickering. Just an overall very basic policy is that if a site generates less than 10 new trips, which is a household, that we don't set conditions of approval. So with the ADA or with the ADU, that's typically less than 10 trips. But we do work with access on those and alleys and that sort of thing. So.
Great to know. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to provide, kind of emphasize a couple of things that Christy brought up. It's really important that when you see these on the agenda, one is anything that's from development is a quasi judicial proceeding, and all of those requirements kick in. And the second thing is to identify whether we are a commenting, or what the commission's role is, whether we're commenting or recommending, or whether, and all the only time is when we're it can be confusing at times, but it's important to understand what our role is on a particular application. And that's what I love about her presentation is that while a lot of the work that our development review people do is the same, but ACHD's obligation to land agency is different in each of those applications.
Thanks, Steve.
Were there any other questions for me?
David, you have any? Oh, then I guess not. Yeah, I don't see him there. Christy, as usual, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Folks, I think we're done. We're adjourned again.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.